Welcome, Midnight, Creed, like and subscribe. Chapter 1. The Box That Kept Time. Some New York streets look as though the city built them and then tried to forget where it had put them. Riddle Street was one of those. It bent between old brick buildings south of Washington Square, narrow, enough to make daylight ask permission before entering. Number 18 was a four-story townhouse with dark windows, an iron railing, and a front door that looked capable of keeping secrets. At 9:20 on a Saturday morning, three of its residents arrived at Nero Wolfe's brownstone on West 35th Street. The frightened one was Edith Vane, a thin woman near 50 who twisted a handkerchief between her fingers. The angry one was Walter Pike, owner of Number 18, broad in the shoulders and loud in the vest. The third was Owen Mercer, younger brother of a man whose body had been found in the cellar that morning. I left them in the front room and went to the kitchen. Wolfe was finishing corn cakes while Fritz inspected a pan of mushrooms as if one of them had presented false identification. "Three visitors," I said. "A landlord, a frightened tenant, and the brother of a dead shipping clerk." Wolfe continued eating. "The dead man touched a Rosewood Box yesterday. The box appears on the same landing every Friday at exactly 11 and disappears at noon. His knife stopped. It was not much, but from Wolfe it counted as applause. "Seat them in the office," he said. At 10, after his morning visit to the plant rooms, Wolfe entered, settled behind his desk, and regarded the visitors without enthusiasm. "Mr. Goodwin tells me," he began, "that a wooden box has acquired punctual habits." Edith Vane leaned forward. "Every Friday at 11, Mr. Wolfe. It appears on the third-floor landing. No one sees who leaves it. At noon it vanishes." "How many times?" "7. "Describe it." "Polished rosewood, brass hinges, about 18 inches long. There is a curved scratch near one hinge." "Locked?" "There is no visible lock, but the lid will not open." Walter Pike interrupted. "This nonsense has killed one of my tenants. Daniel Mercer was found dead in my cellar this morning." Wolfe's eyes went to Owen. "Your brother?" "Yes." "What did he do?" "He worked for Harlan Freight and Shipping. He checked manifests, delivery routes, warehouse numbers, and changes in unloading schedules. And yesterday he handled the box." Owen nodded. "He called me shortly after 11. He said he had carried it into his room." "Did he open it?" "No. When he lifted it, he heard metal clicking inside. 3 clicks, then silence." Wolfe's fingers tightened slightly on the chair arms. "Weight, lighter than it looked. What happened next?" "Someone knocked on his door. Daniel ended the call and said he would telephone later. He never did." Edith Vane lowered her voice. "I saw him at 9:30 last night. He was going downstairs. He looked worried." "Was he carrying anything?" "No." "When was the body found?" "This morning at 7. I went to the cellar because the furnace was knocking. Daniel was lying beside the old coal bin." "Any wound?" "None that I saw. There was a broken drinking glass near him and a folded piece of paper. The police took both." "Odor?" She frowned. "Something bitter, like medicine heated on metal." Walter Pike struck the arm of his chair. "The connection is obvious. Mercer touched the box and died." "No," Wolfe said. "One event followed another. That is not yet a connection." Pike's face reddened. "Then why did we come here?" "Possibly to discover one." Fritz brought beer for Wolfe and coffee for the others. Wolfe poured carefully, drank, and turned back to Owen. "Had your brother encountered trouble at work?" Owen hesitated. Wolfe noticed. "You have withheld something." 3 weeks ago, Daniel said freight was being redirected after the official manifests had been filed. Small changes, different warehouse entrances, altered delivery times, substituted route numbers. What did he think? That someone was stealing selected shipments. Did he report it? He wanted proof first. Did he keep copies? "I don't know. I searched his room after the police came. I found nothing." Pike turned sharply. "You searched his room?" "He was my brother. You had no right." Wolfe looked at Pike. "Your objection suggests that you searched it first." Pike became still. Owen stood. "Did you?" "Sit down," Wolfe told him. Pike glared at Wolfe. "I went there to collect overdue rent." At what time? 6:30 this morning. Edith Vane shook her head. Daniel paid you Wednesday. I saw him hand you an envelope. Pike's mouth tightened. Wolf said, What did you remove from the room? Nothing. Pfui. The word landed harder than a fist. Pike looked toward the door. I found a brass key under the mattress. That is all. Where is it now? In my office desk. Why take it? I own the building. I thought it might open one of my doors. Does it? I have not tried. Wolf leaned back. Who has access to number 18? The tenants, Pike said. Mrs. Vane and Miss Celia Frost live on the second floor. Daniel, Leonard Shaw and Harriet Bell occupy the third. Dr. Amos Vale and his niece Ruth live on the fourth. I have the first floor. Employees? A cleaning woman and Samuel Kerr, my superintendent. When does Kerr visit? Pike hesitated again. Friday mornings. He checks the furnace between 10 and noon. Edith stared at him. You never told us that. I am not required to report my employee's schedule. You are now, Wolf said. Has anyone tried to remove the box? I did, Pike replied. After its second appearance, I locked it in a cabinet in my office. The key remained. In my pocket. At noon I opened the cabinet. The box was gone. Was the cabinet forced? No. Did you report this? Of course not. The police would have laughed. They may still have the opportunity. Wolf turned to Edith. Have you touched the box? Once, 3 weeks ago. It was light and silent. I tried the lid, but it would not open. What have you observed that you have not told the police? She looked at Pike before answering. Daniel argued with a man on Thursday night. I heard them through the heating grate. Words? Daniel said. The changed route is the message. The other man mentioned Friday, but I could not hear. The rest? Owen leaned forward. Did you recognize the voice? No. Why conceal this? Wolf asked. Mr. Pike warned us not to invent scandals that might damage the house. Pike rose. That is not what I said. Wolf's voice hardened. Sit down. Pike obeyed, though his expression promised future disobedience. Wolf rang for Fritz and instructed him to telephone Inspector Kramer. Pike's color changed. There is no need for that. A tenant is dead, evidence was removed from his room, and you are carrying keys around as souvenirs. Inspector Kramer may disagree. Wolf folded his hands over his middle. I will accept the case. Mr. Goodwin will inspect number 18, examine Daniel Mercer's room, the cellar, the third-floor landing, your office, and the cabinet from which the box vanished. You are not coming yourself? Pike demanded. Wolf looked offended. No, I said. He believes Streets should come to him. Wolf ignored me. He will question every resident separately, Wolf continued. You will give him all. Building keys, Pike shook his head. I cannot allow that. Wolf reached for the book on his desk. Then the interview is over. After a moment, Pike pulled a heavy ring from his pocket and dropped it on the desk. I collected it. My fee is $5,000, Wolf said. Your lying has increased the price. Owen spoke quietly. I will pay half. Pike glared at him but said nothing. Wolf looked at me. Bring me the Rosewood Box. That may be difficult. It only performs on Fridays. Then Discover, where it waits between performances. The visitors rose. Edith and Owen went first. Pike paused at the door. You think the box killed Mercer? I think, Wolf said, that a timetable is being used to make deliberate acts appear automatic. When Pike had gone, I remained by Wolf's desk. What do you expect me to find? A house full of people who watched a box without, watching one another. And the 3 clicks? Something inside shifted when lifted. That covers a generous field. Then narrow it. At 11:40, Owen and I stood on the third-floor landing of number 18. A clean rectangle marked the dusty wallpaper where the box had rested the previous day. The hall clock downstairs struck the quarter hour. From inside the wall came a faint, metallic click, then a second, then a third. Owen's face went pale. That was the sound Daniel heard. I pressed my palm against the wallpaper. Beneath it, something vibrated briefly and stopped. The box followed a Friday schedule, but this was Saturday. Someone inside number 18 was testing the mechanism after Daniel's death. The Rosewood Box was gone, but whatever kept time inside number 18 was still running. Chapter 2. The Click. Inside number 18. Riddle Street had the kind of hallway that encouraged secrets. The wallpaper had once been green, the carpet had once been red, and the gas fixtures had once been modern. Time had treated all three with equal disrespect. Owen Mercer stood beside me on the third-floor landing while I kept one hand against the wall. The faint vibration continued beneath the paper for several seconds, then stopped. "That came from inside," Owen said. "Either that, or the house has developed a nervous system." I examined the clean rectangle in the dust. It was 18 inches long, matching Edith Vane's description of the Rosewood Box. Near the lower edge was a narrow groove in the wallpaper, as though something had repeatedly slid against it. The landing window was painted shut. The stair rail offered no hiding place, and the nearest doors belonged to Daniel Mercer's room, Leonard Shaw's room, and Harriet Bell's apartment. A brass ventilation grill sat low in the wall beneath the pale rectangle. I knelt and inspected it. 2 screws were bright. The others were black with age. Owen noticed. Someone removed it. Recently. I took out my pocket knife and loosened 1 screw. Before I could touch the second, a door opened behind us. Leonard Shaw stepped into the hall. He was a lean man in his early 40s with a narrow mustache, polished shoes, and a brown dressing gown that looked too elegant for 11:45 in the morning. He held a cigarette in one hand and suspicion in the other. "What are you doing?" "Improving the ventilation." "This is private property." "That phrase is getting heavy use today," Owen introduced me. Shaw looked unimpressed. "I know who Nero Wolfe is," he said. "I did not know he sent assistants to dismantle walls. He sends me where the walls are more cooperative than the people." Shaw took a drag from the cigarette. "The police have already questioned us." "That must have been tiring. I'll try to make mine different." I pointed at the pale mark. "How long have you known about the box?" "Several months." 7 weeks, according to Mrs. Vane. "Then 7 weeks. You never asked who owned it?" "No." "Why not?" "It was not in my room." That was the answer most New Yorkers would have given, and therefore one worth distrusting. "Did you ever touch it?" "No." "See anyone else touch it?" "Daniel did yesterday." Owen stiffened. I said, "From where did you see him?" "My doorway." "At what time?" "Shortly after 11. "What did he do?" "He lifted the box, listened to it, and carried it into his room." "Did anyone knock on his door afterward?" Shaw paused. "I may have." Owen moved toward him. "You knocked?" Shaw's expression cooled. "I wished to ask whether he had received a parcel of mine by mistake." "What parcel?" "A package of legal papers." "From whom?" "That is private." I stood. "Mr. Shaw, privacy is a fine thing until a corpse gets involved. Then it becomes a hobby." He looked at me, then at Owen. "I work for an insurance office," he said. "The papers concerned a warehouse claim. They were supposed to arrive yesterday." "Did Daniel open the door?" "Yes." "Was the box inside?" "On his table." "Open?" "No." "Did you hear clicking?" "No." "What did Daniel say?" "That he had not seen my parcel." "How long were you there?" "Less than a minute." "Who came after you?" "No one that I saw." Shaw dropped the cigarette into a small brass tray beside his door and went back inside. Owen watched the door close. "Daniel never mentioned him." "That may mean nothing." "Do you believe that?" "I try not to believe before lunch." I returned to the grill. The second screw came loose easily. Behind it was a narrow shaft lined with dust and old wood. A thin brass rod ran vertically through the cavity. Owen crouched beside me. "What is that?" "A reason for the clicking." I touched the rod lightly. Somewhere below us, metal answered, with 3 soft taps. Click, click, click. Owen's face changed. Exactly the sound. The rod was connected to something beneath the landing floor. I could not see what without removing half the wall, and Walter Pike was already short of patience and long on property rights. I replaced the grill and stood. Now we questioned the neighbors. Harriet Bell occupied the front rooms on the 3rd floor. She was a widow of 60, with white hair, bright eyes, and the firm voice of a woman who had corrected other people for most of her life. She invited us into a parlor crowded with china birds and photographs of men who all looked disappointed. "I found the box first," she said before I asked. 7 Fridays ago." "Where?" "Against the wall outside." "What time?" 11 exactly. "I know because the clock had just struck." "Did you see anyone on the stairs?" "No." "Did you touch it?" "Certainly not. One does not handle unknown packages in New York." "You told anyone?" "Mrs. Vane." "Then Mr. Pike." "Did you watch it disappear?" "No. I had luncheon." "Have you ever seen Samuel Kerr here on Fridays?" Her mouth tightened. "The superintendent?" "Often." "What time?" "Usually before 11. He claims to inspect the furnace, though the furnace works no better after he leaves." "Did you see him yesterday?" "Yes. At 10:30. He went downstairs carrying a tool bag." "Did he come up to the 3rd floor?" "I heard footsteps later, but I did not look." "Why?" She gave me a severe glance. "Because I do not spend my days spying through keyholes." Her answer would have been more convincing if she had not known the exact time Kerr entered on E. The 2nd floor. Edith Vane let us into a small sitting room filled with sewing patterns. She confirmed that the box had appeared every Friday for 7 weeks. "Everyone assumed it belonged to someone else," she said. "At first Mrs. Bell thought it was Miss Frost's. Miss Frost thought it belonged to Mr. Shaw. Mr. Shaw said it was probably Daniel's." "And Daniel?" "He said he had never seen it before." "Did anyone ask Mr. Pike?" "Yes. He told us to leave it alone." "Did you see Samuel Kerr yesterday?" "At 10:15. He entered through the front door." "Carrying anything?" "Black tool bag. Did he leave with it?" "I did not see him leave." "Who else was home?" "Most of us. Dr. Vale had gone to his clinic. Ruth Vale left shortly before 10. Miss Frost was in her room. Mrs. Bell was upstairs. Mr. Shaw said he was working. And Pike? In his office downstairs. Daniel. He had taken the morning off. That was new. Why? He said he expected an important delivery. Owen looked at me. "Did he say what kind?" "No." "Did he mention freight records?" Edith hesitated. "Only once. He said someone had turned a schedule into a hiding place." "When?" "Thursday." Evening. That sentence had Wolf written all over it, though Daniel had said it first. Celia Frost occupied the rear 2nd floor room. She was 30, sharp-faced, neatly dressed, and employed as a stenographer for a law firm. She opened the door only 6 inches. "I have already spoken to the police." "I'm not the police." "That is not necessarily comforting." I showed her Pike's keyring. "He authorized the questions. He authorizes everything except repairs." She opened the door wider. Miss Frost admitted seeing the box, but denied touching it. "It appeared at 11 and disappeared at noon." She said, "After the 3rd week, people stopped discussing it." "Did they stop watching it?" "No." "Did Daniel seem interested?" "More than interested. He began timing it." "How?" "He stood in the hall on Fridays with his watch. Once, he marked the floor with chalk." "Why?" "He believed the box was being moved through the wall." Owen stared. "He never told me that. He did not trust easily." "Did he trust you?" I asked. Miss Frost's face closed slightly. "Enough to ask questions." "What questions?" "Whether legal shipping notices could be altered. After filing, whether a type destination change would be valid without a signature." "What did you tell him?" "That it depended on the company rules." "Did he show you anything?" "No." That answer came too quickly. "What did you do yesterday between 10 and noon?" "I was typing." "Anyone visit?" "No." "Did you hear Daniel's door?" I heard Mr. Shaw knock. Later, I heard another knock. What time? Perhaps 11:20. Who was it? I did not look. Male or female footsteps, she thought. Heavy, probably a man. Did you hear voices? One sentence. Daniel said, "You are early?" Anything else? No. When we returned to the landing, Owen looked pale and angry. Everyone knew something except me. Families are often the last to receive official bulletins. I unlocked Daniel's room. It was narrow but orderly. A bed stood against one wall, a desk against another, and a wardrobe beside the window. The police had disturbed little. A dark suit hung over a chair. Shipping journals stood in a neat row on the desk. I examined the table where Shaw said the EE box had rested. 4 small dents marked the wood, one at each corner. Between them lay a curved flake of red varnish, rosewood, or something painted to resemble it. The desk drawers held bills, pencils, and railway schedules. No manifests, no route sheets. Owen opened the wardrobe. His work case is gone. What work case? A black leather portfolio. He carried documents in it. When did you last see it? Wednesday. I checked beneath the bed. Nothing, but dust and a pair of shoes. Then I noticed the clock. It stood on the mantel, a square brass carriage clock showing 11:17. It was not running. I lifted it. From inside came 3 faint clicks. Owen froze. I turned the clock over. A narrow compartment had been cut into the base. Inside was a folded strip of paper no wider than a finger. On it were 4 typed entries, R17. Dock 4, 110R22, Warehouse, 9, 1120R31, South Gate, 1140R12, Cellar, 12. Owen read the last line twice. Cellar, your brother's final destination. I put the strip into an envelope and pocketed it. At 1:15, I telephoned Wolf from Pike's office. Walter Pike stood by the window pretending not to listen. I reported the brass rod, the bright screws, Shaw's visit, Kerr's schedule, the missing portfolio, and the route list hidden in Daniel's clock. Wolf was silent for several seconds. Then he asked, "Harland Freight is regional?" "Yes, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Connecticut." "Mr. Mercer controlled amended manifests?" "He checked them." "Then the box may not be a container." "What is it?" "A signal." "For whom?" "That is what you are being paid to discover." I glanced at Pike. The tenants all saw it, but each assumed it belonged to someone else. "An excellent arrangement," Wolf said. "Public enough to be noticed, private enough to be ignored. And the clicking inside, not inside, Archie. You have already established that the sound can be produced through the wall. So, the box only appears to click. Possibly, or it carries a mechanism that answers another mechanism. That clears everything up. Do not be flippant. Find Samuel Kerr. He may be at the hardware shop. And Archie, yes? Do not allow Mr. Pike to recover the brass key. I looked at Pike's desk. The top drawer was slightly open. Inside, something bright caught the light. A brass key lay beside a folded freight manifest. Across the manifest, in Daniel Mercer's handwriting, were the words, "The Friday box changes the routes." I picked up both items before Pike could move. His expression told me I had just found something he had hoped would stay lost. Chapter 3. The Spring Frame Getting. The Rosewood Box out of number 18 Riddle Street required less detective work than persuasion, though persuasion can be the more dangerous occupation. The folded freight manifest in Walter Pike's desk gave him 3 choices. He could explain it to me, explain it to Inspector Kramer, or let me take the box and postpone both explanations until Nero Wolfe had examined the evidence. Pike chose postponement. He claimed the box had appeared in his locked cabinet shortly after I telephoned Wolfe. That was a neat trick, since Pike had been standing beside me during the call, but neat tricks usually become untidy when described twice. "It was not there this morning," he insisted, "and now it is. I don't know how. You own a remarkable cabinet." The box rested on the bottom shelf. dark and polished, with brass hinges and a curved scratch near the right corner. It matched the pale mark on the third-floor wall and the flake of varnish found on Daniel Mercer's table. I lifted it carefully. 3 faint metallic clicks came from inside. Pike took a step backward. "You heard that," he said. I also heard. "Your superintendent visits every Friday, but neither sound has explained itself." The box was lighter than expected. Something moved within it, but not freely. It felt more like a mechanism shifting under pressure than a loose object rolling around. I wrapped it in a blanket, carried it to the street, and placed it on the floor of a taxi beside my shoes. Owen Mercer came with me. He held Daniel's hidden route list in his coat pocket and spent most of the drive staring at the box. "You think Daniel put papers inside it?" he asked. "I think he discovered that someone else did." "Then why was it empty yesterday?" "We don't know that." "It was." He looked at me. "Leonard Shaw saw it closed on Daniel's table. Closed boxes are excellent witnesses. They never contradict anyone. At the brownstone, Fritz opened the door and looked at the blanket in my arms. Is it alive? Only on Fridays. He led us to the office. Wolf was at his desk with the freight manifest before him. Saul Panzer sat in the red leather chair, quiet and compact, looking like a man who had come to repair a watch and might instead repair a criminal organization. Wolf glanced at the bundle, put it on the table. I placed it on the large table near the globe and removed the blanket. The rosewood shone under the office lamps. Wolf examined it from his chair without touching it. Report. I gave him the complete version. The bright screws in the third-floor grill, the brass rod inside the wall, Leonard Shaw's knock on Daniel's door, Samuel Kerr's Friday visits, Celia Frost's account of a second visitor, the missing work portfolio, the root strip hidden beneath Daniel's clock. When I finished, Wolf looked at Owen. "Your brother wrote the sentence on the manifest?" "Yes." "Certainly? I know his writing. Did he use the phrase, 'the Friday box,' before?" "Not to me." Wolf turned to Saul. "Harland Freight." Saul removed a notebook from his pocket. "Regional company," he said. "Head office on West Street. They move machine parts, chemicals, imported textiles, and high-value instruments. 3 warehouses in New York, 2 in New Jersey. Daniel Mercer was assistant route clerk. He reviewed amendments entered after the original schedules were approved. Who could authorize amendments? 4 people. Operations Director Victor Dane, Route Manager Calvin Reed, Senior Clerk Arthur Moss, and Mercer himself for minor changes. Owen shook his head. Daniel could enter them, but he couldn't approve major changes. Saul nodded. "That is what the company says." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "Losses?" "Nothing officially reported, but an insurer has been asking. Questions about 4 shipments that arrived short during the past 2 months. What shipments? Precision tools, camera lenses, imported silk, and medical equipment. Dates? All Fridays. The office became quiet. I said, "That improves the box's punctuality." Wolf looked at me. "It makes the timetable relevant. Improvement is another matter." He rose. Wolf leaving his chair voluntarily is an event worth observing. He approached the table, bent over the box, and studied the hinges, corners, and narrow seam beneath the lid. "There is no visible keyhole," he said. "The brass key may fit a hidden catch." "Possibly." He held out his hand. I gave him the key from Pike's desk. It was small, flat, and oddly cut at the end. Wolf tried it along the box's lower edge until the point entered a narrow opening concealed beneath the brass trim. He turned it. There was a click, sharper than the sounds we had heard before. The lid rose half an inch. Owen leaned closer. Saul stayed where he was. I moved to Wolf's side, prepared to interfere if the box contained a blade, poison needle, explosion, or another tenant. Wolf lifted the lid with the end of a ruler. Nothing happened. Inside was a shallow compartment lined with dark green felt. Fixed to its center was a rectangular brass frame no larger than a postcard. 2 small springs pressed a hinged crossbar against the base. Wolf touched the bar with the ruler. It lifted under pressure, then snapped back with 3 quick metallic clicks. Click, click, click. Owen stared. That is what Daniel heard. Wolf examined the frame. "It is designed to hold folded paper," he said. I bent closer. "A complicated way to store a note." "Not store. Secure." He pressed the crossbar again. Beneath it were faint parallel marks in the felt, made by the repeated insertion and removal of folded documents. Fine white fibers clung to one spring. A darker stain marked the lower corner. "There has been frequent use," Wolf said. "The paper was inserted beneath the frame and held flat. It could be transported without sliding or revealing itself when the box was lifted." "But there is nothing in it now," Owen said. "No." "Then whoever killed Daniel removed it." "Perhaps." Wolf took a magnifying glass from his desk. He inspected the felt, the brass frame, and the inner edge of the lid. "Archie, bring an envelope and tweezers." I complied. He removed 3 items, a short blue fiber, a grain of reddish powder, and a narrow scrap of thin paper caught behind one spring. The scrap held only part of a typed character, the lower curve of a number or letter. Wolf placed each item in a separate envelope. Owen asked, "Can those tell us what was carried?" "Possibly where it was prepared." Saul said, "The freight company uses blue carbon paper for route amendments." Wolf grunted. "And the reddish powder?" "Warehouse dust," I suggested. "Or brick, rust, dye, sealing compound, or paprika. Speculation is cheap because demand is low." He returned to his chair. I tested the frame once more. The 3 clicks sounded exactly like those from Daniel's carriage clock and the rod behind the landing wall. "We now have 3 things that produce the same sound," I said. "The frame, the clock, and the wall mechanism." "Not accidentally," Wolf replied. "How are they connected?" "The repeated clicks created recognition. Anyone trained to hear them would know that a message had been placed, moved, or received." Owen frowned. "But the tenants heard nothing unless they lifted the box." "The sound was not intended for the tenants." "Then for whom?" "For participants." Wolf poured beer and watched the foam rise. The box was placed on a public landing every Friday at 11. Because it was public, no single person appeared to possess it. Because it disappeared at noon, no document remained long enough to be discovered casually. Each tenant assumed it belonged to another. That assumption provided better protection than a lock. I sat at my desk. "A transfer point." "Yes. Someone placed route changes inside. Someone else collected them, or replaced them with confirmation." Owen looked from Wolf to the open box. "Daniel said the changed route was the message." "Indeed, the papers may not merely have described the thefts, they may have directed them." Saul leaned forward. "A shipment is officially assigned to one warehouse. A false amendment redirects it to another entrance at a precise time. The crew at the false location removes selected cargo before the shipment returns to the proper route." "And the Friday box carries the amendments," I said. Wolf shook his head. "Not necessarily the official documents, more likely copies or instructions. The box permitted conspirators who lived or worked near one another to communicate without meeting." Owen's face hardened. "One of the tenants worked with Daniel's killer. Possibly more than one." The telephone rang. I answered. "Inspector." Kramer was at the other end, sounding as if someone had seasoned his lunch with gravel. "Put Wolf on. He is occupied with a box. Put him on." I handed over the receiver. Wolf listened, said nothing for nearly a minute, then asked, "Cause of death?" Another pause. "Indeed." He hung up. Owen stood. "What did he say?" Wolf looked at him. "Your brother died from a concentrated dose of digitalis." Owen's hands closed. "Poison?" "Yes. Administered in liquid, probably within 2 hours of death." "The broken glass?" "Contained traces of it." I said, "So Daniel drank with someone in the cellar, or was persuaded to drink before entering it." Wolf reached for the route strip recovered from the clock. "R12, cellar. 12 silver," he read. The final entry was not a shipping destination. It was an appointment. Owen's voice was low. "Someone used the same system to direct Daniel to his death." "Yes." "Who?" Wolf ignored the question and turned to Saul. "Find the source of the blue paper fibers. Determine which office machines at Harland Freight use red ribbon or red correction powder. Obtain the personnel schedules for the past 7 Fridays. Saul. Rose. To Archie, Wolf continued. Return to number 18. Learn which tenant takes digitalis, has access to it, or could obtain it. Examine the wall mechanism without Mr. Pike's permission if necessary. That last part improves the assignment. Also locate Samuel Kerr. He knows more about the house than its owner, which may not be difficult. Owen moved toward the open box. Wolf stopped him with a look. Do not touch it. It belonged to the people who killed my brother. No, it belonged to a method. Do not confuse an instrument with the hand that used it. Owen stepped back. I closed the lid. The spring frame made 3 final clicks before the box locked. Wolf regarded it with open dislike. A timetable, he said, is one of crime's favorite superstitions. Repeat an act at the same hour often enough, and people cease asking who performs it. They begin to believe the hour itself is responsible. I picked up my hat. The box had kept its schedule for 7 Fridays. Daniel Mercer had broken the routine by opening it. Someone had corrected that disturbance with poison. Chapter 4. The Missing Route Sheets. Harland Freight and Shipping occupied 3 floors of a grey building on West Street, where the windows faced the river, and the river returned the favour by sending in a smell of oil, rope, and cold iron. I arrived at 9:30 Monday morning with Saul Panzer. Saul carried a notebook. I carried a letter signed by Nero Wolf, authorizing us to ask questions. The letter had no legal force, but Wolf's name often performed better than a warrant among people who wanted to avoid headlines. The receptionist sent us to Victor Dane, the operations director. Dane was a square man of 50 with silver hair, a dark suit, and the smooth manner of someone accustomed to explaining losses without accepting blame. His office walls displayed maps marked with colored routes and framed photographs of trucks, docks, and warehouses. He read Wolf's letter twice. Daniel Mercer's death is a police matter, he said. His missing records may be a company. Matter, I replied. What missing records? That is what we came to discover. Dane looked at Saul. Saul looked back without giving him anything useful. After a pause, Dane pressed a button on his desk. Calvin Reed entered carrying a ledger. He was the route manager, a narrow man with a bald head and rimless spectacles. His hands were stained with blue carbon ink. Mr. Reed supervises all route amendments, Dane said. He can answer your questions. Reed did not look pleased about it. He led us downstairs to the records department, a long room filled with metal cabinets and clerks working behind high desks. Daniel Mercer's desk stood near the rear wall. It had been cleared except for a blotter, an empty pen tray, and a calendar still turned to Friday. A red circle surrounded the number 11. I pointed to it. Did Daniel mark his appointments? Reed glanced at the calendar. Sometimes. Was 11 o'clock important on Fridays? I wouldn't know. That answer is wearing thin. Reed opened the nearest cabinet. Route amendments are filed by week. The original manifest remains in one folder, and approved changes are attached behind it. What color paper? Blue. That matched the fibers Wolf had removed from the box. Saul asked, who types them? Any route clerk, usually the clerk assigned to the shipment. And who signs them? For minor changes, the clerk and I. For major destination changes, Mr. Dane must approve, I said. Show us the files for the last 12 months. Reed's eyebrows rose. That would take hours. We brought the entire morning. He did not enjoy that, but he unlocked the cabinets. We started with the 4 Friday shipments Saul had already identified: machine tools, camera lenses, silk, and medical equipment. Each original manifest was present. Each showed a normal destination. None contained a route change notice. Reed frowned. There should be amendments. How do you know? I asked. The final delivery stamps show different unloading points, yet the papers authorizing those changes are gone. He removed his spectacles and wiped them. They may have been misfiled. How often does that happen? Rarely. Saul opened another folder. Here is a 5th. It concerned imported watch parts shipped from Newark to a warehouse in Queens. The delivery stamp showed that the cargo had first been unloaded at Dock 4 for 20 minutes before continuing to Queens. There was no amendment. The next missing notice involved chemical instruments, then electrical relays, then rare printing, plates. All had moved on Fridays. All had been diverted briefly from their original routes. All had arrived with small shortages that could be blamed on counting errors, damaged crates, or careless packing. By noon we had found 11 missing route change sheets. I said, "That is a large family of coincidences." Reed looked sick. "I never approved these. Your signature may disagree." He stared at me. Saul pulled a preserved amendment from a different folder. Reed's name appeared at the bottom in blue ink. "This is your signature?" "Yes." "Could it be copied?" "Anyone's signature can be copied." "Could Daniel?" "Detect a false one." Reed hesitated. "Possibly. He was unusually good with records." How unusually? He remembered spacing, typewriter defects, paper batches. If an amendment was typed on the wrong machine, he noticed. Was he reviewing old manifests? Reed looked toward Dane's office, though it was 2 floors above us. For the past month. Who ordered him to? No one. Then why? Was he doing it? He said he had found a delivery time that did not match the driver's log. After that he began checking other Fridays. Did he tell you what he found? Only that the errors formed a pattern. What pattern? He would not say until he had proof. It was the same phrase Owen had repeated. I leaned against Daniel's desk. "When did you last speak with him?" "Thursday afternoon." "About?" "A missing amendment." "Which shipment?" Reed opened a ledger and found an entry. "Medical. Lenses. Route R31. That number appeared on the strip hidden in Daniel's clock." "What did Daniel say?" "That the paper had not been lost. It had been removed." "Did he accuse anyone?" "No." "Did he seem frightened?" "Not frightened. Angry." Saul asked, "Who knew he was reviewing the records?" "All the route clerks. Mr. Dane, Arthur Moss." "The senior clerk?" "Yes." "Where is Moss?" Reed pointed toward a glass-partitioned office at the end of the room. Arthur Moss was 45, heavy-lidded, neatly dressed, and entirely too calm when we told him why we were there. His desk was arranged with mathematical precision. Not a pencil was out of line. Daniel was ambitious, Moss said. He enjoyed finding faults. "Did he find yours?" "No." "Did he ever ask you about missing amendments?" "Several times." "What did you tell him?" "That records disappear in every large office." 11 of them? Moss's eyelids lifted slightly. "You have counted?" "We can count when motivated." He folded his hands. "Then perhaps someone removed them after Daniel's death." "Why?" "To make his suspicions appear justified." That was polished enough to have been prepared. I said, "Where were you Friday between 10 and noon?" "Here." "Witnesses? Dozens?" "Did you leave the building?" "No." Saul was studying the typewriter beside Moss's desk. He rolled a sheet into it and struck several keys. The lowercase e printed slightly high. The number 1 leaned to the right. The typed strip from Daniel's clock had the same defects. Moss noticed Saul looking. "That machine is used by half the department," he said. "Including Daniel?" Saul asked. "Sometimes. Including. You?" "Of course," I asked. "Do you own a blue suit?" Moss's calm slipped for the first time. "I own several." The spring frame in the Rosewood Box held a short blue fiber. "So do 10,000 offices in New York." He was right, which irritated me. We returned to Reed's desk. While Saul compared type samples, I examined Daniel's blotter. It looked empty until I held it sideways under the light. Pressure marks. Crossed the paper. I took a soft pencil from the tray and shaded lightly over the surface. Words emerged from the sheet beneath whatever Daniel had written last. Friday, 11, second copy. Below that, Moss knows the old roots. Reed read it over my shoulder and went pale. "Does that mean Arthur Moss?" I asked. "It could." "Could. It mean anyone else?" "No." Before he could say more, Victor Dane appeared at the end of the aisle. "That is enough," he said. "You have disrupted my department for 3 hours." I showed him the list of missing amendments. 11. Route sheets gone. All Friday diversions. All shipments with unexplained shortages. His jaw tightened. I will conduct an internal review. You had a year. I did not know. Daniel did. Dane's eyes moved to the pressure writing on the blotter. What does that say? I covered it with my hand. Something Daniel considered important. You have no right to remove company property. Then call Inspector Kramer and explain the missing records. He did not call. Saul and I left with copies of the delivery logs, typewriter samples, and a list of employees who could authorize route changes. At 3:20, I reported to Wolf from the office. He sat behind his desk with the spring frame open on the table. Inspector Kramer occupied the red leather chair, scowling at the box as if it had insulted the department. 11 missing notices, I said. All Friday shipments. Each cargo was redirected briefly, then returned to its official route. Small. Shortages every time. Wolf closed his eyes. Thefts designed to resemble errors. Daniel began reviewing old files a month ago. He found the route sheets had been removed, not misplaced. Who knew? Victor Dane, Calvin Reed, Arthur Moss, and most of the records office. Kramer grunted. That gives us a few dozen murderers. I narrowed it by finding Daniel's final pressure note. It said, Moss knows the old routes. Wolf opened his eyes. Knows, not changed. Yes, a distinction. I placed the type sample from Moss's machine beside the route strip. Same raised E, same leaning number 1. Kramer leaned forward. Enough for a warrant? No, Wolf said. Kramer glared at him. I asked Goodwin. And he would have answered incorrectly. I said, thanks. Wolf picked up the list of diversions. Dock 4, warehouse. 9, Southgate. These correspond to the entries hidden in Mercer's clock. The last entry was cellar at 12. Yes, the first 3 were stolen cargo instructions. The 4th was written to imitate them. Kramer said, allure. Precisely. Mr. Mercer recognized the code and obeyed it, believing he would meet the person using the system. I sat down. Then whoever wrote the list knew Daniel had discovered the pattern, and knew he trusted route numbers more than spoken invitations. Kramer asked, Moss? Wolf's lips tightened. Mr. Moss may be a thief, a killer, both or neither. Daniel's note does not accuse him. It states that he knows the old routes. Then bring him in and squeeze him. You squeeze too soon, and what you require leaks away. Kramer stood. I'll handle the police work. A novelty worth encouraging. When Kramer had gone, Wolf turned to Saul. Find the drivers assigned to all 11 shipments. Determine whether one substitute driver appears repeatedly. Saul nodded. To Archie, return to Riddle Street. Daniel's missing portfolio may contain copies of the route sheets. Someone searched his room and failed to find it. Pike, possibly, but Mr. Pike took only the brass key. A man seeking papers would have disturbed more. Where would Daniel hide them? Wolf looked at the spring frame. In a place used for transfers, not storage. The wall? Or the mechanism behind it? I reached for my hat. Wolf picked up Daniel's list of missing routes. Archie. Yes? The documents disappeared over a year. That required continuing access, patience, and confidence. Meaning, the murderer did not kill in panic because a theft had just occurred. He killed because Mercer had discovered a system. I looked at the 11 missing notices. 1 vanished. Paper could be carelessness. 11 vanished papers were a method. Daniel Mercer had found the method, and someone had removed him as neatly as the route sheets. Chapter 5. The Friday Ritual Buy. Tuesday morning, the Rosewood Box had become the most punctual suspect Nero Wolfe had ever entertained. It sat open on the long table in the office, its brass spring frame exposed beneath the lamps. Wolfe had spent half an hour examining it after breakfast, which meant it received more attention than most human visitors and caused less irritation. I was preparing to return to Riddle Street when Saul Panzer arrived with a list of the 11 diverted shipments. Different drivers, Saul reported. Different trucks, different warehouses. No single employee appears on every run. Wolf frowned. Then the system was designed to avoid dependence on a particular driver. One thing repeats, Saul said. Each diversion was entered. Between Thursday afternoon and Friday morning, every truck reached the altered point between 11 and noon. The hour of the box, I said. Wolf looked at the list. Not merely the day, Archie. The interval. He handed me a sheet containing the names of every tenant at number 18. Questioned them again. They enjoyed it so much the first time. This time, do not ask what they saw. Ask what they did every Friday between 10:30 and noon. You too. Think one of them had a regular assignment. I think routine can conceal an action more effectively than darkness. I reached for my hat. Wolf added, determine whether the box appeared on holidays. Mrs. Vane said it did. Memory. Improves when challenged by a calendar. At number 18, Walter Pike met me in the front hall with the expression of a landlord who had discovered that murder was bad for rent collection. You have taken my box and my records, he said. The box belonged to whoever used it. The records belonged to Harland Freight. Your only uncontested property is the building, and parts of that appear negotiable. He refused to smile. I started with Harriet Bell. She received me in her parlor beneath the disappointed family photographs. I placed a calendar on the table and asked her to mark every Friday on which she remembered seeing the box. She marked 7 dates. One was New Year's Day. You are certain? I asked. Entirely. Mr. Pike complained that the superintendent had come despite the holiday. Samuel Kerr was here. At 10:40. I saw him leave before noon. Did the box appear? Yes. Did anyone collect mail that day? No delivery came. That is why the box seemed especially strange. Was the weather bad on any Friday? 2 weeks ago, there was heavy snow. And the box? Present at 11. Who was in the house? Nearly everyone. The streets were difficult. I asked about her own Friday routine. She admitted that she left her apartment at 10:50 each Friday to buy fish from a nearby market. She returned around 11:20. Always? Fresh fish should not be left to chance. That sounded like something Wolf might have said if the subject were trout and the speaker better informed. Did you ever pass anyone on the stairs? Sometimes Miss Frost. Once Mr. Shaw. Frequently Mr. Kerr. Carrying the black tool bag? Yes. Edith. Vane's routine was sewing lessons. Each Friday at 11, 2 neighborhood girls came to her second-floor room. They stayed until noon. Did they ever notice the box? I asked. Once. One of them asked whether it contained a musical instrument. Why? She heard clicking. From the wall. That fixed the wall mechanism before Daniel's death and confirmed it was not added afterward. Did the girls use the front stairs? Yes. Then whoever placed the box risked being seen. Edith shook her head. Not necessarily. At 11, the hall clock strikes loudly. My pupils arrive just before it. Mrs. Bell leaves for the market. Mr. Pike goes into his office to review rents. Everyone moves at once. A crowded hall can provide privacy. That sounds impossible. It is one of New York's specialties, Celia. Frost admitted that she left for the law office at 10:45 every Friday, except when working from home. Did the box appear when you were absent? So I was told. Did it appear when you stayed? Yes. What time did you leave last Friday? I did not. I was typing. Did Daniel ever ask about the Friday routine? He asked who could predict when the landing would be empty. What did you say? That it was never empty for long. Did he ask who used the wall? Her expression changed. What do you mean? The brass rod behind the ventilation grill. She looked toward the closed door. I heard it moving once, she said. Months before the box appeared. Who was in the hall? Samuel Kerr. He claimed he was adjusting a heating control. Did Daniel know? I told him 2 weeks ago. That gave Daniel another reason to study the landing. On the 3rd floor, Leonard Shaw answered his door wearing a dark suit and no welcoming expression. I asked about his Fridays. I work from home until noon, he said. Every week? Usually. At 11. I review claim files. Alone? Yes. Convenient. For whom? We're working on that. I asked whether his insurance office handled Harland freight claims. He denied it, but his eyes moved, before his mouth did. Does your company insure warehouses? I asked. Among other properties. Dock 4. He took too long. We handled an old fire claim there. Warehouse 9? No. Southgate? I do not recognize. I wrote the answer down. What exactly do you do at the insurance office? I review cargo losses. That connected him more firmly to the thefts than his missing legal parcel had. Did Daniel ever consult you? Once. About the 11 Friday shortages? Shaw's face tightened. He asked how insurers treated small recurring losses. What? Did you tell him that repeated losses usually indicate fraud or poor supervision? Did he mention Harland Freight? No. Did he show you route sheets? No. Again, too quick. Dr. Amos Vale's niece, Ruth, answered the 4th floor door. She was 26, quiet and pale from too many nights spent helping at her uncle's clinic. Her Friday routine was easy to verify. She left at 9:30 and worked at the clinic until 6. Your uncle keeps digitalis? I asked. Her face went still. For heart patients. Liquid? Yes. Who has access? My uncle, me, and the clinic nurse. Has any gone missing? She hesitated. A small bottle disappeared last month. Was it reported? My uncle believed it had been misplaced. When did you discover the loss? After Daniel died. The police asked us to check. Did Daniel ever visit? The clinic. Once, 3 weeks ago, he asked my uncle about the effects of digitalis. That was worth sitting straighter for. Why? He said he was writing a report about dangerous cargo. Did he receive any? No. My uncle would. Never give it to him. Did Daniel ask how quickly it acted? Yes. So Daniel had suspected poison before he was poisoned, or had suspected digitalis was being transported in stolen shipments. Dr. Vale confirmed Ruth's account. He was a tired man with careful hands and a grey beard. Daniel asked whether concentrated digitalis had an odor, Vale said. I told him very little. Did he say why? He claimed a damaged medical shipment had lost 2 bottles. One of the diverted cargoes, I said. Vale frowned. I knew nothing about diverted cargo. Someone did. Samuel Kerr was not at the townhouse. Pike said he had gone to repair a boiler on Canal Street. I telephoned the address and learned no boiler had been repaired there in 6 months. At 2:30, I returned to the brownstone. Wolf was eating lunch in the dining room. Fritz had served roast duck with rice, and Wolf did not permit murder to disturb the sauce. I waited until coffee before giving my report. The box appeared on New Year's Day, during a snowstorm, and on every ordinary Friday. It did not depend on mail, weather, business hours, or whether particular tenants were home. Wolf dabbed his lips. Therefore, the schedule mattered more than conditions. Precisely. I described the tenants' routines, Shaw's work with cargo claims, the missing digitalis from Vale's clinic, and Samuel Kerr's lie about the Canal Street boiler. Wolf returned to the office and settled behind his desk. The fixed hour served 2 purposes, he said. It told one participant when to deposit information and another when to retrieve it. Neither needed to know the other. I sat at my desk. Then they were strangers? Possibly. Or they wished to behave as strangers. The box was exposed for an hour. Anyone could interfere. Yet no one did. Human beings are reluctant to touch an object that may belong to a neighbor. The conspirators depended on manners, curiosity, and fear in equal measure. And the wall mechanism? A signal that the transfer had occurred. I looked at the spring frame. The person placing a paper pressed the frame, producing 3 clicks. The brass rod carried that sound through the wall. Or allowed a second person below to trigger an answering signal. Below meaning Pike's office or the cellar. That gave the route entry a fresh meaning. Wolf leaned back. Criminals often trust schedules more than people, Archie. A man may lie, panic, drink too much, or arrive late. 11 o'clock does none of those things. Clocks can run slow. That is why the hall clock matters. The telephone rang. I answered. It was Saul. He had found one more fact about the missing route notices. Each diverted shipment had been insured by the same company, Continental Marine and Cargo. Leonard. Shaw's employer. I relayed it. Wolf closed his eyes. Mr. Shaw denied handling Harland freight claims. He said his office handled a fire claim at Dock 4. Then he selected the smallest available truth and used it to cover a larger lie. You want him brought here? Not yet. Why not? Because an insurance clerk may know which cargo can disappear without provoking immediate inquiry. That makes him useful to thieves. It does not make him Daniel Mercer's murderer. And Kerr, find him. He has disappeared. No, Archie, the box disappeared. Mr. Kerr has merely gone somewhere. I got up again. At the door, Wolf said, one more question. Who placed the box? No. Who wound the hall clock? I stared at him. The clock struck 11 each Friday, Wolf continued. The conspirators trusted its signal, therefore someone ensured that it remained accurate. Pike owns the house. Ownership is not maintenance. Samuel Kerr. Find him. I left for Riddle Street once more. In the front hall, the old clock stood taller than I did, its dark wooden case polished by generations of hands. I opened the lower door. The pendulum swung steadily. Inside, tied behind the weights, was a narrow roll of blue carbon paper. Across its outer edge, someone had written a single line. Friday cancelled. Mercer knows. The timetable had finally been broken. The person who broke it had known why Daniel Mercer had to die. Chapter 6. The wrong delivery. Saul Panzer found the missing shipment because thieves, like honest businessmen, eventually produce paperwork. He arrived at the brownstone Wednesday morning carrying a narrow folder and wearing the mild expression he used when he had spent 12 hours making someone else regret a careless signature. Wolf was in the plant. Rooms, since nothing short of fire, flood, or the collapse of lunch could disturb him there. Saul and I waited in the office until 11. The Rosewood Box remained on the long table, open and empty. Beside it lay the blue carbon roll I had found inside. The hall clock at number 18. Friday cancelled. Mercer knows. Saul read the message. Someone ended the system after Daniel died, he said, or after they realized Wolf was looking at it. At least they know when to stop. Wolf considers that a confession of intelligence. At 11 sharp, Wolf entered, settled behind his desk, rang for beer, and looked at Saul. Report. Saul opened the folder. 5 months ago, Harland. Freight carried 4 precision milling assemblies from Newark to Trenton Machine Works. Total value, $84,000. That shipment appears among the missing route notices? Wolf asked. Yes. The official manifest sent it. Directly to Trenton. A later amendment redirected the truck to Warehouse 9 in Jersey City for an inspection. I said, one of Daniel's coded locations. Saul nodded. The truck arrived at Warehouse 9 at 11:20 on a Friday. A man with company. Papers ordered the driver to unload 2 crates for weighing. 25 minutes later, the same crates were returned. Empty? I asked. Not entirely. They had been filled with damaged machine castings of roughly the same weight. Wolf's brows lowered. The substitution was prepared in advance. Exactly. The shipment reached Trenton sealed. No one opened it for 3 days. By then, the driver's detour looked like an ordinary routing error. Who signed the warehouse receipt? Edward Sloan, an employee. No such employee existed. Wolf poured beer. Continue. The stolen assemblies were broken into parts and sold through 3 machinery dealers. Each dealer bought from a different intermediary. The trail was meant to disappear there. But it didn't. I said. Daniel Mercer had already started following it. Saul placed 3 invoices on Wolf's desk. Each showed the sale of industrial components by small firms with ordinary names and temporary addresses. Daniel requested copies of these invoices from the manufacturer, Saul said. He told them Harland Freight was checking a damage claim. He compared serial numbers and found parts from the stolen milling assemblies. Wolf studied the papers. How did you obtain these? One dealer kept carbon copies. Another remembered Daniel because he asked whether the seller had worn glasses. The third had a warehouse photograph taken during an inspection. Saul produced the photograph. It showed a loading area crowded with metal parts and wooden crates. Near the rear stood a man in a dark coat, turned partly away from the camera. The face was unclear, but the posture was familiar. I picked it up. Leonard Shaw. Saul nodded. Same height, same narrow shoulders, same habit of holding his left arm close to his side. Habit? Old injury. Shaw broke the elbow 6 years ago. It doesn't straighten fully. Wolf looked at the photograph without enthusiasm. Identification by posture is useful but insufficient. There's more, Saul said. Continental Marine and Cargo insured the stolen equipment. Shaw reviewed the claim. I sat forward. He knew which parts had serial numbers, which losses would be investigated, and how long the insurer would wait before inspecting. Yes, the claim was settled as concealed shipping damage. Trenton Machine Works accepted partial payment instead of demanding a criminal inquiry. Wolf drank. Mr. Shaw selected cargo valuable enough to steal, but specialized enough that substitution would delay discovery. Saul nodded. He also knew which shipments carried more insurance than scrutiny. And the intermediaries? One has vanished. One is in prison for another fraud. The third is a man named George Pell. Occupation? Used machinery broker. Location? Brooklyn. Did he name Shaw? Not willingly. Saul's expression did not change, but I knew that meant Pell had eventually discovered willingness. He said instructions. Arrived every Thursday by messenger, Saul continued. Typed on blue paper. Each gave a shipment number, route code, and temporary unloading point. Pell never met the person organizing the thefts. The Friday box, I said. One person deposited the route. Another collected it and sent instructions to the intermediaries. Pell did meet the man who supervised the substitutions. Samuel Kerr, Wolf asked. No. Arthur Moss. That earned silence. I said, Daniel's note said Moss knew the old routes. He knew them because he was using them, Saul replied. Wolf leaned back. What did Pell say about Moss? He called himself Arthur Moore, but Pell identified his photograph. Moss arranged workers, duplicate seals, and replacement weights. He received cash after each successful shipment. Then Shaw selected the cargo and manipulated the insurance. Moss altered the route records and supervised the physical theft. That is how it looks. Wolf's eyes narrowed. How it looks is often how a trap wishes to be admired. I said, You're not satisfied. I am rarely satisfied by two guilty men who fit too neatly into separate duties. Saul removed another paper from the folder. Daniel may have agreed. It was a copy of a letter Daniel had sent to the manufacturer of the stolen milling assemblies. The final paragraph read, The person handling the insurance claim may not be the person directing the route change. I believe both receive instructions from someone with access to the transfer point. Wolf read it twice. The organizer remained apart. Yes, Saul said. Daniel had identified Shaw and Moss as participants, but he was still looking for the person above them. I asked, Did either of them know he was looking? Moss certainly did. Daniel questioned him about old route numbers. Shaw knew Daniel was studying recurring cargo losses. And the organizer? Saul tapped the cancelled Friday message. Apparently. Wolf turned to me. Where is Samuel Kerr? Still missing. Pike says he has not reported for work since Saturday. Residence. A room behind Pike's hardware shop. Empty when I checked. Clothes gone, bed stripped, no forwarding address. Did he flee before or after Daniel's death became public? Pike claims he last saw him Friday afternoon. Claims? Pike's relationship with facts remains informal. Wolf looked at Saul. Find Kerr's bank, family, friends, and habits. A man who vanishes leaves behind unpaid debts, disappointed women, or both. Saul nodded. The telephone rang. I answered. A nervous male voice asked for Nero Wolf. This is Archie Goodwin. My name is Calvin Reed. Harland Freight. The route manager sounded as if he were calling from inside a locked closet. What can we do for you? I found something in Daniel Mercer's files. What? A delivery receipt. It should have been destroyed. Where are you? The office. Who else knows? Before he could answer, a door opened at his end. Reed stopped breathing. Then he whispered, "Moss." The line went dead. I told Wolf. He did not waste time expressing concern. Go. Saul and I reached West Street in 12 minutes, which was not a record but offended several traffic laws. Harland Freight's records room was almost empty. A clerk pointed toward Calvin Reed's glass office. The door stood open. Reed was on the floor beside his desk, conscious but bleeding from a cut above his ear. A metal file drawer lay beside him. Saul knelt. "Who hit you?" Reed blinked. "Someone came behind me." "Moss?" "I didn't see." "Where is the receipt?" Reed pointed weakly toward the desk. The drawer had been emptied. Papers covered the floor. I searched until I found a torn corner of blue paper trapped beneath the cabinet. On it were 3 typed lines, R22 Warehouse 9 Collector, SK. The rest had been ripped away. Saul read over my shoulder. Samuel Kerr. Or, someone wanted Daniel to think so. Reed struggled upright. "There was another name," he said. "Whose?" I only saw it for a second. Daniel had written it across the bottom. "What name?" Reed closed his eyes, forcing memory. "Pike." I looked at Saul. Walter Pike owned the townhouse, controlled the cabinet, employed Samuel Kerr, and wound the clock through the man who maintained it. The transfer point had not merely operated inside his house. It had operated under his authority. We returned to the brownstone with the torn receipt and Reed's statement. Wolf listened without interruption. When I finished, he placed the scrap beside the cancelled Friday message. "Mr. Pike may be the organizer," I said. "Possibly." "He had access to the box, the wall, the clock, and Kerr." "Yes." "He lied about Daniel's rent and removed the brass key." "Yes." "He had the manifest in his desk." "Yes." I waited. Wolf scowled at me. "You are counting facts, not weighing them." "They seem heavy enough." "Then answer this. If Pike organized the thefts, why preserve a receipt naming both Kerr and himself? Daniel may have written Pike's name later. Then why leave the receipt where Reed could find it? Someone missed it. Perhaps. We picked up the photograph of Leonard Shaw at the machinery warehouse. Shaw had reason to fear Mercer. Moss had reason. Kerr had reason. Pike had means to manage the ritual. Yet only one of them knew Daniel would obey the false route to the cellar. The organizer. Indeed. And Mercer came close enough to identify him. Wolf closed the Rosewood Box. The spring frame answered with 3 metallic clicks. "The theft of the milling equipment proves the conspiracy," he said. "It does not prove the murder." "Then what will?" "The wrong delivery." I looked at him. He tapped the copied invoices. Daniel followed stolen machinery through 3 intermediaries. One item reached a dealer it was never intended to reach. That mistake exposed the chain. Find which part was sold outside the organizer's plan and who profited from it. Saul stood. I said, "You think one of the thieves cheated the others?" "Criminal. Partnerships are based on mutual distrust restrained by profit. Remove the restraint and someone talks." Outside, a truck changed gears on 35th Street. The stolen equipment had been redirected, dismantled, and sold. Daniel Mercer had followed it backward. At the end of that route waited the person who had arranged not only the thefts, but his final delivery to the cellar. Chapter 7. The Cellar Clue. The cellar of number 18 Riddle Street had been designed by a man who believed darkness was a building material. I went there Thursday morning with Saul Panzer, 2 flashlights, and Walter. Pike's ring of keys. Pike followed us down the narrow stairs, objecting to each step as if we were charging him rent for it. The air smelled of coal dust, damp brick, and old iron. Pipes crossed the ceiling at head height. Along the eastern wall stood 6 wire storage cages, each secured by a padlock. At the rear was an ancient freight lift with a wooden platform and a metal gate. "You never mentioned a lift," I said. "It hasn't worked in years," Pike replied. Saul shone his light over the cables. "Someone has greased these recently." Pike looked annoyed. "Kerr may have done it." Samuel Kerr seems to have done everything except remain available for questions. The place where Daniel Mercer had died lay beside the third storage cage. A chalk outline remained on the concrete. Near it, a dark stain marked the spot where the broken glass had fallen. I crouched and examined the floor. The police had collected the glass, but a thin, shining line ran from the stain toward a drain. Someone had washed the area after Daniel's, a death, though not thoroughly. "Who cleaned here?" I asked. "No one," Pike said. "That answer is developing a large family." Saul inspected the drain while I looked at the cages. The first held trunks and broken furniture belonging to Harriet Bell. The second contained Edith Vane's sewing supplies. The third was marked Mercer in fading paint. I found the proper key and opened it. Inside were 2 wooden crates, a folded chair, an old coat rack, and several bundles of shipping journals tied with cord. Owen had not mentioned that his brother stored work material in the cellar. Pike stood behind me. "Those are private belongings." That concern arrived late. I opened the first bundle. The journals were several years old and contained printed freight schedules. Daniel had marked certain Friday routes with red pencil, R17, R22, R31. The same numbers found in his clock. Saul said he was rebuilding the theft pattern. He needed records that could not disappear from the office. Beneath the journals was a clean rectangular outline in the dust, the exact size of Daniel's missing black leather portfolio. The case had been stored there and removed recently. Caught beneath the cord around the lowest bundle was a folded receipt for storage cage rent. The receipt was signed by Walter Pike. The renter's name was Harold Finch. I turned. "Who is Harold?" "Finch?" Pike's face remained still, but his eyes did not. "A temporary tenant. You gave Wolf a complete list of residents. Finch wasn't on it. He does not live upstairs." That does not answer the question. Pike looked toward Saul, then back at me. "Finch rents the rear cellar room." I pointed my flashlight beyond the freight lift. A narrow wooden door stood almost hidden behind stacked boards. "You have a man living down here." "It was once. A caretaker's room. It has a window into the alley." "How long has he occupied it?" 8 months. "What does he do?" "Bookkeeping." "For whom?" "I don't know." "You collect rent without knowing his occupation?" "He pays in cash." "That explains your respect for privacy." Pike produced another key reluctantly. The rear room was small but not poor. It contained a bed, a desk, a washstand, and a shelf of books. A grey suit hung from a hook. On the desk stood a typewriter under a dust cover. No one was present. Saul lifted the cover and tested several keys. The lowercase e printed evenly. The number 1 stood straight. It was not the machine used for Daniel's hidden root strip. I opened the desk drawers. The top held pencils and household bills. The second contained railway timetables. In the bottom drawer were envelopes addressed to Harold Finch at several freight offices under slightly different job titles: accounts clerk, dispatch assistant, inventory auditor. "So much for knowing nothing about shipping," I said. Pike stared at the envelopes. "He told me he kept books for small businesses. He was careful not to say what kind." Saul examined a photograph on the shelf. It showed Finch in front of a loading dock, younger and heavier, wearing the uniform of Harland Freight. The door behind us creaked. A thin man stood there holding a paper sack. He was around 50, with sandy hair, colorless eyes, and shoulders that seemed permanently drawn inward. His face had the practiced blankness of a man who survived by being overlooked. "Mr. Finch?" I asked. He looked at Pike. "What are they doing in my room?" "Investigating Daniel Mercer's death," I said. Finch set the sack on the washstand. "I already spoke to the police." "You told them you knew nothing about freight records." "I said I knew nothing about Daniel's work." "You worked for Harland Freight." "Years ago." "How many?" 12. "What position?" "Dispatch clerk." "Did you handle route changes?" His eyes shifted toward the desk. "Sometimes." Saul held up one of the envelopes. "You continued working for freight companies after leaving Harland. Temporary bookkeeping. Did you know Daniel Mercer before he moved here?" "No." That was a lie. It came too smoothly. I showed him the photograph. When was this taken? I don't remember. Daniel worked at the same dock. Many people did. Did he recognize you? Finch said nothing. Pike moved toward the stairs. I have business upstairs. Saul stepped into his path. You can conduct it later. Pike looked at him and decided not to argue. I returned to the cellar and examined the pipes above the chalk outline. One pipe ran from Finch's room toward the third-floor wall where we had found the brass signaling rod. Behind it, something blue showed against the brick. I reached into the narrow gap and pulled out a torn fragment of paper. Did he flee before or after Daniel's death became public? Pike claims he last saw him Friday afternoon. Claims? Pike's relationship with facts remains informal. Wolf looked at Saul. Find Kerr's bank, family, friends, and habits. A man who vanishes leaves behind unpaid debts, disappointed women, or both. Saul nodded. The telephone rang. I answered. A nervous male voice asked for Nero Wolfe. This is Archie Goodwin. My name is Calvin Reed. Harland Freight. The route manager sounded as if he were calling from inside a locked closet. What can we do for you? I found something in Daniel Mercer's files. What? A delivery receipt. It should have been destroyed. Where are you? At the office. Who else knows? Before he could answer, a door opened at his end. Reed stopped breathing. Then he whispered, Moss. The line went dead. I told Wolf. He did not waste time expressing concern. Go. Saul and I reached west. Street in 12 minutes, which was not a record but offended several traffic laws. Harland Freight's records room was almost empty. A clerk pointed toward Calvin Reed's glass office. The door stood open. Reed was on the floor beside his desk, conscious but bleeding from a cut above his ear. A metal file drawer lay beside him. Saul knelt. Who hit you? Reed blinked. Someone came behind me. Moss? I didn't see. Where is the receipt? Reed pointed weakly toward the desk. The drawer had been emptied. Papers covered the floor. I searched until I found a torn corner of blue paper trapped beneath the cabinet. On it were 3 typed lines, R22, Warehouse 9 Collector, SK. The rest had been ripped away. Saul read over my shoulder, Samuel Kerr. Or, someone wanted Daniel to think so. Reed struggled upright. There was another name, he said. Whose? I only saw it for a second. Daniel had written it across the bottom. What name? Reed closed his eyes, forcing memory. Pike. I looked at Saul. Walter Pike owned the townhouse, controlled the cabinet, employed Samuel Kerr, and wound the clock through the man who maintained it. The transfer point had not merely operated inside his house, it had operated under his authority. We returned to the brownstone with the torn receipt and Reed's statement. Wolf listened without interruption. When I finished, he placed the scrap beside the cancelled Friday message. Mr. Pike may be the organizer, I said. Possibly. He had access to the box, the wall, the clock, and Kerr. Yes. He lied about Daniel's rent and removed the brass key. Yes. He had the manifest in his desk. Yes. I waited. Wolf scowled at me. You are counting facts, not weighing them. They seem heavy enough. Then answer this. If Pike organized the thefts, why preserve a receipt naming both Kerr and himself? Daniel may have written Pike's name later. Then why leave the receipt where Reed could find it? Someone missed it. Perhaps he picked up the photograph of Leonard Shaw at the machinery warehouse. Shaw had reason to fear Mercer. Moss had reason. Kerr had reason. Pike had means to manage the ritual. Yet only one of them knew Daniel would obey the false route to the cellar, the organizer. Indeed. And Mercer came close enough to identify him. Wolf closed the Rosewood Box. The spring frame answered with 3 metallic clicks, bas ici. Theft of the milling equipment proves the conspiracy, he said. It does not prove the murder. Then what will? The wrong delivery. I looked at him. He tapped the copied invoices. Daniel followed stolen machinery through 3 intermediaries. One item reached a dealer it was never intended to reach. That mistake exposed the chain. Find which part was sold outside the organizer's plan and who profited from it. Saul stood. I said, "You think one of the thieves cheated the others?" Criminal. Partnerships are based on mutual distrust restrained by profit. Remove the restraint and someone talks. Outside, a truck changed gears on 35th Street. The stolen equipment had been redirected, dismantled, and sold. Daniel Mercer had followed it backward. At the end of that route waited the person who had arranged not only the thefts but his final delivery to the seller. Chapter 7. The Cellar Clue. The cellar of number 18 Riddle Street had been designed by a man who believed darkness was a building material. I went there Thursday morning with Saul Panzer, 2 flashlights, and Walter, Pike's ring of keys. Pike followed us down the narrow stairs, objecting to each step as if we were charging him rent for it. The air smelled of coal dust, damp brick, and old iron. Pipes crossed the ceiling at head height. Along the eastern wall stood 6-wire storage cages, each secured by a padlock. At the rear was an ancient freight lift with a wooden platform and a metal gate. "You never mentioned a lift," I said. "It hasn't worked in years," Pike replied. Saul shone his light over the cables. "Someone has greased these recently." Pike looked annoyed. "Kerr may have done it." Samuel Kerr seems to have done everything except remain available for questions. The place where Daniel Mercer had died lay beside the 3rd storage cage. A chalk outline remained on the concrete. Near it, a dark stain marked the spot where the broken glass had fallen. I crouched and examined the floor. The police had collected the glass, but a thin, shining line ran from the stain toward a drain. Someone had washed the area after Daniel's death, though not thoroughly. "Who cleaned here?" I asked. "No one," Pike said. "That answer is developing a large family." Saul inspected the drain while I looked at the cages. The first held trunks and broken furniture belonging to Harriet Bell. The second contained Edith Vane's sewing supplies. The third was marked Mercer in fading paint. I found the proper key and opened it. Inside were 2 wooden crates, a folded chair, an old coat rack, and several bundles of shipping journals tied with cord. Owen had not mentioned that his brother stored work material in the cellar. Pike stood behind me. "Those are private belongings." That concern arrived late. I opened the first bundle. The journals were several years old and contained printed freight schedules. Daniel had marked certain Friday routes with red pencil, R17, R22, R31, the same numbers found in his clock. Saul said he was rebuilding the theft pattern. He needed records that could not disappear from the office. Beneath the journals was a clean rectangular outline in the dust, the exact size of Daniel's missing black leather portfolio. The case had been stored there and removed recently. Caught beneath the cord around the lowest bundle was a folded receipt for storage cage rent. The receipt was signed by Walter Pike. The renter's name was Harold Finch. I turned. "Who is Harold?" "Finch." Pike's face remained still, but his eyes did not. "A temporary tenant. You gave Wolf a complete list of residents. Finch wasn't on it. He does not live upstairs. That does not answer the question." Pike looked toward Saul, then back at me. "Finch rents the rear cellar room." I pointed my flashlight beyond the freight lift. A narrow wooden door stood almost hidden behind stacked boards. "You have a man living down here?" "It was once. A caretaker's room. It has a window into the alley." "How long has he occupied it?" 8 months. "What does he do?" "Bookkeeping." "For whom?" "I don't know." "You collect rent without knowing his occupation?" "He pays in cash." "That explains your respect for privacy." Pike produced another key reluctantly. The rear room was small but not poor. It contained a bed, a desk, a washstand, and a shelf of books. A grey suit hung from a hook. On the desk stood a typewriter under a dust cover. No one was present. Saul lifted the cover and tested several keys. The lowercase e printed evenly. The number 1 stood straight. It was not the machine used for Daniel's hidden root strip. I opened the desk drawers. The top held pencils and household bills. The second contained railway timetables. In the bottom drawer were envelopes addressed to Harold Finch at several freight offices under slightly different job titles: accounts clerk, dispatch assistant, inventory auditor. So much for knowing nothing about shipping, I said. Pike stared at the envelopes. He told me he kept books for small businesses. He was careful not to say what kind. Saul examined a photograph on the shelf. It showed Finch in front of a loading dock, younger and heavier, wearing the uniform of Harland Freight. The door behind us creaked. A thin man stood there holding a paper sack. He was around 50, with sandy hair, colorless eyes, and shoulders that seemed permanently drawn inward. His face had the practiced blankness of a man who survived by being overlooked. "Mr. Finch?" I asked. He looked at Pike. "What are they doing in my room?" "Investigating Daniel Mercer's death," I said. Finch set the sack on the washstand. "I already spoke to the police. You told them you knew nothing about freight records." I said I knew nothing about Daniel's work. "You worked for Harland Freight?" "Years ago." "How many?" 12. "What position?" "Dispatch clerk." "Did you handle route changes?" His eyes shifted toward the desk. "Sometimes." Saul held up one of the envelopes. "You continued working for freight companies after leaving Harland?" "Temporary bookkeeping." "Did you know Daniel Mercer before he moved here?" "No." That was a lie. It came too smoothly. I showed him the photograph. "When was this taken?" "I don't remember. Daniel worked at the same dock. Many people did." "Did he recognize you?" Finch said nothing. Pike moved toward the stairs. "I have business upstairs." Saul stepped into his path. "You can conduct it later." Pike looked at him and decided not to argue. I returned to the cellar and examined the pipes above the chalk outline. One pipe ran from Finch's room toward the third-floor wall, where we had found the brass signaling rod. Behind it, something blue showed against the brick. I reached into the narrow gap and pulled out a torn fragment of paper. It was part of a route change notice. The printed heading was missing, but the surviving lines read, "Temporary destination, Southgate Authorized Collection, 11:40, Friday confirmation." H.F. Finch saw the initials and stopped pretending to be calm. "Those are not mine. They match Harold Finch." They could match anyone. "Henry Ford is unlikely to help." Saul examined the torn edge. "This is part of a larger sheet." I looked at Finch. "Where is the rest?" "I have never seen it." Daniel hid copies in the cellar. Someone removed them from his portfolio. This fragment was pushed behind a pipe near where he died. Finch swallowed. Pike said, "You see? Finch was involved. He had access to the cellar and the freight records." Finch turned on him with surprising speed. "You told me the room was safe." The words came out before he could stop them. No one spoke for a moment. I said, "Safe for what?" Finch looked at Pike, then at the door. Saul closed it. Finch lowered himself onto the bed. "I did not kill Mercer." "That is a useful beginning," I said. "Continue." He stared at the paper fragment in my hand. "Years ago, I worked under Arthur Moss. He asked me to copy old route formats. At first, I thought it was to correct filing errors. Later, I understood the notices were being used to redirect cargo." "Why? Didn't you report it?" "They paid me." "Who?" "I never knew the organizer. Moss brought instructions. Sometimes the papers were left in the Rosewood Box." "Who collected them?" "Different people." That was the point. No one knew the whole chain. "Your initials are on the notice." I confirmed that the substitute crew was ready at Southgate. That was all. That was enough to steal cargo. His face tightened. "I stopped 6 months ago. The box began appearing 7 weeks ago. It had been used elsewhere before that. The meeting point changed when Daniel began asking questions at the office." "Why number 18? Finch looked at Pike. Pike's expression turned dangerous. "Because Pike offered the landing," Finch said. Pike lunged. Saul caught him by the arm and twisted it behind his back before I had time to enjoy the attempt. "That is a lie," Pike said. "Then explain the wall mechanism," I told him. "Explain the cabinet. Explain Kerr." Explain why you concealed Finch's tenancy. Pike's breathing filled the cellar. Finch went on. Pike did not organize the thefts. He rented access. He was paid to keep the clock accurate, allow the box to appear, and make sure no one interfered. Who paid him? I don't know. Did Daniel? No. Daniel found the cellar cages 2 weeks ago. He saw my old Harland photograph and recognized me. What did he say? That he had traced the false routes backward. He knew Moss prepared them. Shaw selected the claims, and I confirmed collection crews. Did he know the organizer? Finch hesitated. He said he was close. How close? He had found one shipment that did not follow the usual division of profit. A stolen machine part was sold separately. The money went directly to someone who had never appeared in the freight records. The wrong delivery, Saul said. Finch nodded. Daniel believed that payment identified the organizer. Where is the evidence? In the missing papers from his portfolio. Who took them? I don't know. You were in the cellar Friday night. Finch's face went pale. I heard the lift. What time? About 10. Who used it? I stayed in my room. You expect us to admire your restraint? I heard Daniel speaking with someone near the cages. He said, you made one mistake. You took your own share. Then I heard a glass break. Did you look? Not until later. How much later? 5 minutes. And Daniel? On the floor. Why didn't you call for help? I thought he was already dead. I saw the route notice beside him. My initials were on it. I tore off the corner and hid it behind the pipe. So the police would not connect you. Yes. Who was? The other person. I did not see. But you heard the voice. Finch looked down. Male or female? I asked. He rubbed his palms together. Male. Did you recognize it? He did not answer. Pike said, he is inventing this. Finch looked up at him. It was not Pike. That removed one possibility and increased the value of the rest. I took Finch, Pike, the paper fragment, and Daniel's journals back to the brownstone. Saul stayed behind to examine the lift and search for the missing half of the notice. Wolf listened while Finch sat in the red leather chair and Pike occupied the yellow one under protest. When I finished, Wolf looked at Finch. You knew the voice. Finch's lips moved. I cannot be certain. Certainty is not required. Recognition is. Finch stared at the open spring frame. It sounded like Arthur Moss. Pike released a breath. Wolf noticed. So, Wolf said, Mr. Moss may have met Daniel in the cellar, but a voice heard through pipes, and fear is not proof. I placed the torn notice on his desk. The initials are Finch's. He admits participating. In the thefts, participation is established, murder is not. I said, Daniel accused someone of taking a private share. Wolf nodded. The organizer's mistake. One stolen item was sold outside the usual chain, and its payment led to him. Or her, I said. Wolf's eyes came to me. Indeed. Until. Then every suspected organizer had been a man. Pike, Shaw, Moss, Kerr. But Daniel's appointment had been arranged through paper, not voice. The poison had been placed in a glass. The fixed schedule required access, not strength. Wolf leaned back. Mr. Finch claims the voice was Moss's. He may be truthful, mistaken, or protecting someone else. Finch lowered his head. Wolf looked at Pike. And you concealed a tenant who connected your house to Harland Freight. I only rented him a room. You rented more than a room. You rented silence. Pike said nothing. Wolf turned to me. Bring Mr. Moss, Mr. Shaw, and Dr. Vale here tomorrow evening. Also, Mrs. Vane, Miss Frost, Mrs. Bell, Mr. Reed, and Owen. Mercer. The office gathering? No. A rehearsal. For what? For Friday at 11. He looked at the Rosewood Box. The conspirators trusted their timetable because it allowed them to act without meeting. We shall restore the ritual and see who still obeys it. The clock in the office struck 4. Finch flinched at the first note. A man may stop committing a crime. It takes longer to stop listening for its signal. Chapter 8. the keeper of the toll. Timetable Friday arrived with rain against the windows and Nero Wolf in a temper before breakfast. The weather was not responsible. Wolf disliked rain only when required to walk through it, and no such disaster had been proposed. His annoyance came from Harold Finch, who had spent the night under police supervision and had produced 3 versions of the truth without improving any of them. At 9:30, Saul Panzer arrived with a packet of employment records. Finch worked for Harland Freight 12 years ago, Saul said. After that, he joined Eastern Transport Contractors. Wolf looked up from the packet. The company connected to the substituted cargo crews. Yes, Eastern supplied temporary drivers, warehouse hands and loading teams. 4 of the 11. Diverted shipments used Eastern workers, I said. Finch told us he performed temporary bookkeeping. He did more. He maintained routing schedules and issued replacement crew orders. Access to destination changes. Complete access. Wolf's lips tightened. And after leaving Eastern? He kept working for them unofficially. Cash payments. No tax records. He arranged crews when a regular driver or warehouse team had to be replaced at short notice. That explains the initials on the South Gate notice, I said. HF confirmed the collection crew. Saul placed another document on the desk. Finch also rented postal boxes under 2 false names. Copies of Friday route schedules were sent there from Harland Freight. From whom? We don't know yet. The envelopes were typed, unsigned, and paid in cash. Wolf leaned back. Mr. Finch was not merely a minor participant, he was the keeper of the timetable. The phrase suited him. Finch had the appearance of a man who would apologize to a clock for arriving early. Inspector. Kramer had deposited him in the front room at 10. I brought him into the office. He looked worse than the day before. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes red, and his hands would not remain still. He took the red leather chair and stared at the rosewood box on the table. Wolf said, "You lied about the extent of your work." Finch swallowed. "I was afraid. You were paid." "Yes." "To do what?" "To coordinate temporary crews. For stolen shipments." "I did not know at first." "That defense expired years ago." Finch lowered his eyes. Wolf tapped the employment records. "You had access to freight schedules, route systems, warehouse codes, and contractor lists. You could arrange for substitute workers to appear at a false destination without attracting attention." Finch said nothing. "You also maintained the Friday ritual at number 18. His head came up. "Pike maintained the house." "Mr. Pike supplied the location. You maintained the timetable." Finch looked toward me as if I might help. I had no plans in that direction. Wolf continued. "Every Thursday, an accomplice prepared a route change. On Friday, the instruction was placed in the Rosewood Box at 11. You collected it before noon." Finch shook his head. "Not every week." "How often?" "When there was a shipment. 7 recent appearances. Only 4 contained instructions. What did the others contain?" "Nothing." That interested Wolf. "Why place an empty box?" "To preserve the routine." "Precisely." "The box had to appear even when no theft was planned. Otherwise, its appearance would identify an active operation." I said, "The empty Fridays made it look like a harmless habit." Finch nodded. Wolf asked, "Who deposited the papers?" "I never." "No, that is difficult to believe." "It was arranged that way. I collected the route sheet, copied the crew instructions, and returned a confirmation slip. I never waited to see who placed the paper." "Where did you take the original?" "Usually to Arthur Moss." "Usually." "Sometimes another collector came." "Who?" "A man I knew only as Gray." "Description?" "Tall, thin, dark hat. He never removed his gloves." I said, "That narrows New York to several 100,000. Finch rubbed his hands. "He spoke little. Once I thought I recognized his voice, but he changed it afterward." "As whose voice?" Finch hesitated. "Leonard Shaw's." That gave the office a small chill. Wolf did not react. "You are uncertain?" "Yes." "But you knew Shaw lived above you." "I knew his name. I did not know he was involved until Daniel began asking questions." Then explain the box. Finch stared at it. Pike bought it from an estate sale. Kerr altered it. The spring frame. Yes. Kerr fitted the brass mechanism and connected the wall rod to the cellar pipe. Why? So I could signal from below. I said. 3 clicks meant the paper was ready. Finch nodded. If I pressed the rod from the cellar, the spring frame clicked upstairs. If someone lifted the box, the frame clicked again. A mechanical acknowledgement, Wolf said. Finch looked at him. The person depositing the message knew it had been collected because the box was returned to the landing with a confirmation slip. The person below knew a paper had arrived because the rod carried the sound. Then the box was moved more than once during the hour, I said. Yes. Pike sometimes brought it to the landing. Sometimes Kerr did. I collected it through the service lift. That was the part we had been missing. The freight lift connected the cellar to the 3rd-floor landing. The wall panel beside the box mark must have concealed the lift opening. No one saw the box placed, I said, because it came up inside the wall. Finch nodded. The lift stopped behind the panel. Kerr had cut a narrow door in the molding. From the stairs, it looked like part of the wall. And when Pike locked the box in his cabinet, I asked. Finch looked miserable. Kerr had a duplicate cabinet key. So much for the miracle. Wolf's voice sharpened. Who controlled the schedule? Finch answered slowly. I did. Not Pike? No. Pike only made sure the hall clock was correct and the landing clear. Kerr handled the mechanism. I kept the shipment times and sent the crew instructions. And the unknown accomplice supplied the route changes. Yes. Why Friday? Harlan Freight processed final weekend amendments on Friday mornings. Changes entered before noon were less likely to be reviewed until Monday. Why 11? The route office changed shifts at 10:45. Between 11 and 11:30, the morning clerk had left, and the afternoon clerk was still sorting new work. It was the safest gap. Wolf closed his eyes. There it was. The box had not chosen 11 because of superstition. 11 was the weak joint in the company's routine. I asked, did Daniel know you collected the papers? Not at first. He suspected Moss. Then he found my old photograph and followed me. To the cellar? Yes. When? 2 Fridays before his death. What happened? He confronted me. I told him enough to protect myself, meaning you named others. I named Moss and Shaw. Did you name Pike? Yes. And the organizer? Finch shook his head. I did not know. Wolf opened his eyes. You knew more than you admit. No. You handled route changes for months. You saw typing, phrasing, abbreviations, paper, corrections, and shipment choices. A man familiar. With records identifies habits as readily as faces. Finch's breathing changed. Wolf pressed. Who prepared the notices? I cannot prove it. Name the person. Finch looked at the floor. Calvin Reed. I sat straighter. The frightened route manager had seemed weak, anxious, and nearly killed for finding Daniel's missing receipt. Wolf's expression did not change. Why Reed? The phrasing. He always wrote temporary destination instead of alternate destination. The company stopped using that wording years ago, but Reed preferred it. Anything else? He placed the route number above the location. Moss placed it below. Saul took out the torn fragment found behind the cellar pipe. Temporary destination, South Gate. Reed's phrase. I said, then why was Reed attacked? Finch looked at me. Maybe because he wanted out. Or to make him appear innocent, Wolf said. Finch shook his head quickly. I did not attack him. No one accused you. His panic told us the accusation had already occurred inside him. Wolf said, describe the final Friday. Finch's fingers closed around his knees. The box arrived at 11. There was a route strip inside. 4 entries. I recognized the first 3 as old codes. The same list Daniel hid in his clock? Yes. The 4th said cellar 12. What did you do? I knew it was not for a shipment. I put the paper back. For Daniel. I thought so. Why? Because the confirmation initials were DM. That was new, I said. Daniel Mercer. Finch nodded. The strip was a summons, yes. Who placed it? I don't know. Did you use the lift? No, I stayed below. Why? Daniel had threatened to expose us. I was afraid he would bring the police. Yet you remained in the cellar. I had nowhere else to go. Wolf leaned forward. At what time did Daniel arrive? 11:55. Alone? Yes. Who came after him? Finch's face tightened. I heard the lift. From above? Yes. Who stepped out? I did not look. You recognized the voice. I told Mr. Goodwin. I thought it was Moss. Thought. Finch licked his lips. The first words sounded like Moss. Then Daniel said, You were careful to make him speak first. I felt the pieces shift. Wolf said, Explain. I think someone brought Moss down, or made Daniel believe Moss was there. Then another person spoke. What did the second person say? Finch closed his eyes. You should have left the old roots buried. Did you recognize that voice? Finch did not answer. Wolf's tone hardened. You have protected this person through theft, fraud, and murder. Either name the voice, or I shall tell Inspector Kramer that you arranged the cellar meeting. Finch's eyes opened. It was Calvin. Reed. Silence held the office. I said, Reed was supposedly at Harland Freight. He left, Finch said. He often left during the shift change. No one watched the route manager. Wolf rang for beer. Did Reed kill Daniel? I heard a glass break. Then Daniel said, The wrong delivery was yours. Reed answered, It was my payment. After that, nothing. The private share, Saul said. The stolen machine parts sold outside the conspiracy had gone to Reed. Wolf poured his beer, but did not drink. Why did Reed attack himself? Finch stared. I said, A file drawer to the head is a risky performance. Not if someone else delivered the blow by arrangement, Wolf said. Or if the injury was less serious than it appeared. Finch began shaking his head. I have told you everything. No, Wolf replied. You have told us enough to move suspicion from yourself. That is the truth. Perhaps. But you collected the route changes, operated the dead drop, coordinated the crews, and concealed the final summons. You were not a bystander. Finch looked at the Rosewood Box. I never met the people who left the papers. Wolf's eyes narrowed. That is the lie you have loved most. Finch raised his head. A dead drop protects strangers only if neither side attempts to learn the other. But you lived below the mechanism, controlled the lift, and watched the schedule for months. Curiosity alone would have made you look. Finch's face emptied. Wolf said, Whom did you see place the final route strip? For several seconds, only the office clock moved. Then Finch whispered, Edith Vane. I looked at him, the frightened seamstress, the woman who had brought the case to Wolf, the woman who heard Daniel's arguments through the heating grate. Wolf remained still. Did she write it? I don't know. She carried the box from her room and placed it behind the wall panel at 10:55. Why conceal this? She said Daniel was in danger. She said the meeting would expose the organizer. And you believed her? I wanted to. Wolf closed his eyes. Finch had been the keeper of the timetable, but not its master. He knew the routes, collected the messages, and sent crews toward stolen cargo. Yet on the final Friday, someone had used his system against Daniel Mercer. 11. The box had delivered a route. At noon, that route ended in death. Chapter 9. Why Mercer died. Harold Finch had told us the truth in pieces, which is one of the safest ways to lie. He had admitted handling route changes, arranging substitute crews, collecting papers from the Rosewood Box, and hiding the fragment bearing his initials. He had then decorated those admissions with Leonard Shaw's disguised voice, Calvin Reed's phrasing, and Edith Vane carrying the final message. It was a generous distribution of guilt. By Friday afternoon, Wolf had stopped believing any part of it that Finch had not been forced to admit. The office was quiet after lunch. Wolf sat behind his desk with his eyes closed, his hands resting on the arms of his chair. The Rosewood Box stood open on the long table. Beside it lay the torn Southgate notice, the cancelled Friday message, Daniel's route strip, and photographs of the spring frame. Saul Panzer occupied the red leather chair. I was at my desk with a notebook and the feeling that the facts had formed a circle but refused to show us the entrance. Edith Vane denies carrying the box, I said. Wolf did not open his eyes. Of course, that could mean Finch told the truth. It could also mean Mrs. Vane prefers freedom. Celia Frost says Edith was in her sewing room at 10:55. Her pupils? Both remember arriving before 11. One says Edith never left the room. The other says she went into the hall for less than a minute. Insufficient. Calvin Reed's movements are better. 3 clerks saw him at Harland Freight between 11:40 and 12:15. Continuously? No. One saw him at 11:40, another at 12:05. Then there is a gap. 25 minutes, not enough to reach Riddle Street, kill Daniel and return. Saul said, even by taxi it would take 15 minutes each way. Wolf opened his eyes. Then Mr. Finch's accusation against Reed was not merely unsupported, it was physically absurd. I leaned back. He expected us to accept the voice through the pipes. He expected Inspector Kramer to accept it. The police admire a named suspect, especially one who can be squeezed. Wolf regarded the evidence on the table. Mr. Finch constructed his account carefully. He admitted crimes that could already be proved and denied the one that mattered. He placed Mr. Moss, Mr. Shaw, Mr. Reed, and Mrs. Vane between himself and the murder. Saul said, Finch had better reason than any of them to stop Daniel. Yes. He knew Daniel had found the route pattern. Yes. He knew Daniel had identified the dead drop. Yes. I said, but the notice Daniel removed from the box is missing. Wolf's gaze came to me. That is the point. Archie. I waited. He pointed toward the spring frame. When Daniel lifted the box, he heard 3 clicks. We assumed the sound came merely from the frame shifting. It did, because something had been secured beneath it. I looked at the empty brass frame. Daniel unknowingly removed a paper. Not unknowingly for long. When he opened the box in his room, the folded notice either fell free or remained caught against the lid. Mr. Shaw saw the box closed on the table, but he did not see its interior. Then Daniel found the evidence after Shaw left. Precisely. Saul asked, what was on it? Wolf turned to him. Something that frightened Finch more than the missing route records. The doorbell rang. I went to answer it. Owen Mercer stood on the stoop holding a flat parcel wrapped in brown paper. His face looked as if sleep had become an old acquaintance he no longer trusted. This was delivered to me, he said. No return address. I took him to the office. Wolf indicated the yellow chair. Owen sat and placed the parcel on his knees. When did it arrive? Wolf asked. Half an hour ago. A boy brought it to my apartment. Did he wait? No. Open it, Archie. I cut the string carefully. Inside was Daniel Mercer's missing black leather portfolio. Owen stood. That is his. The case had been wiped, but the lower corner still bore Daniel's initials in faded gold. I opened it on Wolf's desk. It contained copies of 8 missing route change notices, 3 warehouse receipts, lists of stolen cargo, and a handwritten summary of payments made to intermediaries. One final envelope lay beneath the papers. 2. Daniel had written, if anything happens to me, HF runs the Friday transfer. Owen read the sentence and gripped the chair. Harold Finch. Wolf said nothing. Inside the envelope was half of a route notice. Its torn edge matched the fragment Archie had found behind the cellar pipe. I fitted the 2 pieces together. The complete notice read, Temporary destination, Southgate authorized collection, 11:40. Friday confirmation, HF final account to be retained. By HF below that, Daniel had written in pencil, Finch kept a private share. He is not only the collector. Saul leaned closer. The wrong delivery, Wolf nodded. One stolen machine component was sold outside the normal chain. The payment went directly to Finch. I said, Daniel discovered Finch was cheating the others. More than that, the private sale proved Finch could select cargo, arrange collection, and dispose of it without instructions from the supposed organizer. So Finch was higher in the scheme than he admitted. He was the organizer of the physical operation. Shaw identified profitable cargo through insurance claims. Moss supplied or altered records. Pike rented the transfer point. Kerr maintained the mechanism. But Finch controlled the routes and crews. Owen's voice was hard. Then Finch killed Daniel. We must still prove it. I examined the portfolio. Who sent this? Wolf looked at Saul. Saul said, someone who found it in Finch's possession and decided not to be found holding it. Pike? I asked. Possibly Kerr. Wolf shook his head. No, Mr. Kerr is no longer missing. Saul reached into his pocket and produced a folded telegram. Kerr was found this morning. In Albany, he said. He had registered under his sister's married name. Kramer's men are bringing him back. Did he talk? A little. He says Finch ordered him to alter the box and wall mechanism. Finch paid him after every successful transfer. Did Kerr know about the murder? He says Finch told him the Friday operation was cancelled because Daniel had stolen a notice from the spring frame. That gave us the bridge. I said, Finch knew Daniel had removed the evidence. Yes, Wolf replied. The paper was supposed to remain in the box until Finch collected it through the lift. Daniel disrupted the schedule by carrying the box into his room. Owen stared at the spring frame. What did Daniel take? Wolf tapped the completed notice. A record showing Finch retained a private payment. It linked his initials, the altered route, the collection crew, and the stolen cargo. Then why didn't Daniel go to the police? He wanted the organizer. Not merely one participant, he arranged to confront Finch. Through the false route strip? I asked. No. Finch arranged the meeting. Daniel believed the cellar appointment would expose whoever controlled Finch. I looked again at the route strip, R17, Dock 4, 11 OR22, Warehouse 9, 1120 R31, South Gate, 1140 R12, Cellar, 12 Ma. The first three old routes proved Finch knew what Daniel had found, I said. The fourth directed him to the cellar. Wolf nodded. Finch used Daniel's own method of investigation as bait. Owen's hands closed into fists. And the digitalis? Wolf turned to Saul. Saul removed a report from his folder. Finch worked briefly for a medical transport contractor 3 years ago. He knew how concentrated digitalis was packaged. More important, Ruth Vale saw him near her uncle's clinic the week the bottle disappeared. I said, she didn't mention that. She did not know Finch's name then. She identified his photograph this morning. Wolf continued. Finch stole the digitalis before Daniel's murder. He did not act in sudden panic. He prepared for the possibility that Mercer would uncover him. Owen stood and walked to the window. He planned it for weeks. Perhaps not the exact death, Wolf said, but he prepared a means. I asked, how did he get Daniel to drink? The broken glass contained diluted whiskey and digitalis. Finch knew Daniel occasionally drank with him in the cellar while questioning him. He had already pretended cooperation. Daniel trusted him? Not fully. Enough to accept a drink while waiting for the supposed organizer. The office door opened and Inspector Kramer entered without waiting to be announced. Pearlie Stebbins followed him, carrying resentment as usual. Kramer looked at the portfolio. So you got it. You knew it was coming? I asked. No, but Kerr started talking in Albany. He said he sent a parcel by messenger before the detectives picked him up. That answers the delivery, Saul said. Kramer took the completed route notice and read Daniel's writing. This gets Finch for the freight thefts. And the murder, Owen said. Kramer looked at Wolf. Does it? Wolf scowled. Finch had motive, preparation, opportunity, and knowledge of the final appointment. He lied repeatedly to conceal each. That isn't the same as putting the poison in the glass. No, Kramer smiled without pleasure. Good. For a minute I thought you had made my job easy. Wolf ignored him. The final proof will come from the ritual, I said. The rehearsal you mentioned. Yes. Wolf looked at the clock. It was 4:20. At 11 tomorrow morning, the Rosewood Box will return to the landing at number 18. Kramer frowned. Tomorrow is Saturday. Mr. Finch believes schedules control people. We shall discover whether fear controls him more effectively. You expect him to touch the box. I expect him to believe it contains the evidence Daniel removed. Kramer said, he's in custody. He need not be free to betray himself. That was Wolf's way of saying he had designed something and had no intention of explaining it. Before the curtain rose, Owen turned from the window. I want to be there. No, Wolf said. He killed my brother. That is why you will not be there. Owen began to object, then saw Wolf's face and stopped. Kramer dropped the notice onto the desk. I'll bring Finch here tonight. Tomorrow at 10:30, Wolf said. Bring Moss, Shaw, Pike, Kerr, Reed, Edith Vane, Celia Frost, Harriet Bell, and Dr. Vale as well. All of them? Yes. You plan to arrest the whole house? I plan to remove the murderers. Remaining refuge. Kramer glared, but he did not refuse. After he left, I closed the Rosewood Box. The spring frame snapped into place with 3 faint clicks. Daniel Mercer had heard those clicks when he lifted the box on the final Friday. They had told Finch that the message had been disturbed. They had told Daniel that something was hidden inside. And before the hour ended, they had started the timetable of his death. Chapter 10. Wolf explains the box at 10:30. Saturday morning, Nero Wolf's office contained enough guilt to require additional chairs. Inspector Kramer occupied the red leather chair, which had not improved his disposition. Pearlie Stebbins stood near the bookshelves. Owen Mercer sat beside Edith Vane, while Celia Frost, Harriet Bell, Leonard Shaw, Calvin Reed, Arthur Moss, Walter Pike, Samuel Kerr, and Harold Finch formed an uneasy half-circle facing Wolf's desk. Finch had been brought from police custody. He sat with his shoulders drawn inward and his hands clasped tightly between his knees. The Rosewood Box rested on the long table. Its lid was closed. No one looked at it for long, which meant everyone looked at it repeatedly. Wolf entered from the hall at 11 precisely. He crossed to his chair, settled himself, and rang for beer. Kramer glanced at the office clock. You insisted on 11. Indeed. Why? Wolf looked at the assembled company. Because this inquiry began with an hour, it is fitting that it end with one. Fritz brought the beer. Wolf poured, waited for the foam to settle, and drank before addressing us. The Rosewood Box appeared on the third-floor landing of number 18 Riddle Street every Friday at 11. It remained until noon, and then vanished. The residents observed. This for 7 weeks, yet no one intervened because each assumed the box belonged to someone else. Harriet Bell lifted her chin. I reported it to Mr. Pike. You did, Wolf acknowledged. Mr. Pike concealed its purpose because he was being paid to provide the location. Pike's face darkened. I rented access, he said. I did not know about murder. You knew the box carried instructions connected to stolen freight. I knew it carried papers. Finch never told me what they were. Wolf turned his head. Mr. Finch told no one more than was necessary. That was the strength of his arrangement. Finch said nothing. Wolf continued. The box was not merely placed on the landing. Mr. Kerr altered the old freight lift so it stopped behind a concealed wall panel. He fitted the box with a spring-loaded frame and connected a brass signaling rod to the cellar. Kerr shifted in his chair. I tested the signaling rod again on Saturday morning, he said. Finch ordered me to make certain Daniel had not damaged the mechanism. Pike paid me to repair the lift. Mr. Finch paid you to modify it, Wolf corrected. Kramer looked at Kerr. We have his statement. Kerr lowered his eyes. Wolf indicated the box. The spring frame held folded route change notices securely. A paper could not slide, fall, or be exposed when the box was moved. When the frame opened or shifted, it produced 3 metal clicks. He nodded to me. I crossed to the table, used the brass key, and opened the box. I pressed the crossbar. Click, 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 click. The sound was small, but Finch reacted as if it had come from directly behind him. Wolf saw it. So, Wolf said, the box served as a collection point. One participant deposited a route change. Another collected it through the hidden lift. They did not need to meet, speak, or know each other's identities. Leonard Shaw said, that does not make Finch the murderer. No, it makes him the man who controlled the exchange. Wolf looked at Shaw. You selected shipments through the insurance claims handled by your office. You knew which cargo was valuable, which shortages would produce settlements instead of criminal inquiries, and which companies would accept delay as incompetence. Shaw's mouth tightened. To Mr. Moss, Wolf continued, fell the alteration and removal of records. He prepared false amendments, supervised certain substitutions, and removed route sheets from the company files after the shipments were diverted. Moss said, you cannot prove that. Kramer reached into a folder. We have typewriter comparisons, Pell's identification, and 3 payments made under your false name. Moss stared ahead. Wolf turned to Calvin Reed. Mr. Reed knew Daniel. Mercer had begun reviewing old manifests. He feared exposure and concealed his knowledge, but Mr. Finch falsely named him as the organizer and murderer. Reed looked at Finch with something colder than anger. Wolf continued. Mr. Pike provided the building and protected the ritual. Mr. Kerr maintained the lift, clock, cabinet key, and signaling mechanism. Mr. Shaw identified profitable cargo and supplied the selections to Mr. Moss, who prepared the false route notices, deposited them through the concealed panel, and removed the corresponding documents from Harland Freight. When Calvin Reed discovered Daniel's surviving receipt, Moss struck him beside the filing cabinet and tried to recover it. Reed's whispered warning and Moss's fingerprints on the fallen drawer confirmed the attack. But Harold Finch stood at the center. Finch raised his head. I arranged crews, that is all. No, Wolf said. You kept the timetable. The office remained still. Wolf leaned back. You had worked for Harland Freight and later for Eastern Transport Contractors. You knew route systems, contractor lists, warehouse entrances, shift changes, and delivery intervals. You selected temporary crews who would obey written instructions and ask no questions. Every Friday at 11, you collected the route notice and sent workers to the altered destination. Finch's voice was thin. I never chose the shipments. Not initially. Mr. Shaw supplied that information. But eventually you began acting independently. Saul Panzer placed the completed Southgate notice on Wolf's desk. Wolf lifted it. This paper proves it. The notice bears your initials, HF, and directs the collection crew to Southgate. It also states that the final account was to be retained by you. Finch looked away. One stolen machine component, Wolf said, was sold outside the agreed chain. Its payment went directly to you. That was the wrong delivery. The mistake Daniel Mercer followed backward. Owen leaned forward. My brother. Found that? Yes. He compared serial numbers, missing route sheets, warehouse receipts, and insurance claims. He discovered that the same Friday system connected all 11 diversions. Wolf held up Daniel's handwritten note. Finch kept a private share. He is not only the collector. Finch's lips parted, but no sound came. Wolf's voice hardened. Daniel knew you were not a passive messenger. You controlled enough of the operation to redirect cargo for yourself. Kramer said. And Mercer took the evidence from the box. Wolf nodded. On the final Friday, Daniel lifted it shortly after 11. He heard the spring frame click. Inside was the Southgate notice, folded beneath the crossbar. He carried the box into his room and removed the paper. Finch shook his head. You cannot know that. We know the notice was torn. One portion was hidden behind a cellar pipe. The other was recovered from Daniel's portfolio. The torn edges match. Pearlie Stebbins displayed the joined sheet. Finch stared at it. Wolf continued. When you collected the box, the notice was gone. You understood immediately that Daniel had found it. He had already questioned you about the route pattern and recognized your old Harland Freight photograph. I did not kill him. You prepared for that possibility weeks earlier. Wolf looked toward Dr. Vale. Doctor? Vale spoke quietly. A bottle of concentrated digitalis disappeared from my clinic. My niece later identified Finch as the man she had seen near the medicine room. Ruth Vale had not been brought to the gathering, but her signed statement lay in Kramer's folder. Finch licked his lips. I was never inside that clinic. You had worked for a medical transport contractor, Wolf said. You knew the drug, its packaging, and its effect. He picked up Daniel's root strip. You then prepared a false series of instructions using old codes Daniel would recognize. Before 11, you used the concealed freight lift yourself and placed the strip beneath the spring frame. Dock 4, Warehouse 9, South Gate. Finally, cellar, 12 o'clock. Owen's face had gone pale, but he did not look away. You lured Daniel downstairs, Wolf continued. You told him the organizer would meet him. You gave him whiskey, containing digitalis while he waited. Finch spoke more loudly. He drank willingly. The room froze. Kramer leaned forward. Wolf said nothing for 3 seconds, then he murmured, "Indeed." Finch realized what he had said. I mean, if someone gave him whiskey. You knew it was whiskey, Wolf replied. The contents of the broken glass were not disclosed to you, nor did Mr. Goodwin mention that Daniel accepted the drink willingly. Finch stood abruptly. Pearlie Stebbins moved behind him. Wolf's voice remained steady. You killed him because he had removed the notice and identified your private theft. After he collapsed, you searched his portfolio and tore away the portion bearing your initials. You hid it behind the pipe, then lied that you had found it beside his body. Finch's breathing became ragged. Mr. Kerr took Daniel's portfolio from the storage cage before Mr. Goodwin searched it. Finch had ordered him to remove the evidence, but Kerr concealed the documents inside the unused lift housing instead of destroying them. Frightened by the murder, he later reunited the papers with the portfolio and sent it to Owen Mercer by messenger. That gave us the second half of the notice. Kerr stared at the floor. Wolf looked at Edith Vane. Mr. Finch accused Mrs. Vane of carrying the final root strip. She did not. He chose her because she had admitted watching the landing and hearing conversations through the heating grate. Edith's hands trembled, but her voice was firm. I never touched the box. I know. Wolf turned back to Finch. You also accused Mr. Reed, claiming to recognize his voice in the cellar. But Mr. Reed could not have traveled from West Street to Riddle Street and returned during the verified interval. Your story was designed to spread guilt among those already compromised. Finch's face had become gray. Kramer said, Sit down. Finch remained standing. Owen rose slowly. Why didn't you simply take the paper from Daniel's room? Because, Wolf answered for Finch. Leonard Shaw knocked on the door. Other tenants were moving through the hall. Finch could not risk entering. He therefore used the root system Daniel trusted and summoned him to the cellar. Finch looked at Owen. I didn't mean for it to happen that way. Owen took one step toward him. Kramer raised a hand. Finch's control broke. He would have ruined everything, he said. Moss was careless. Shaw was greedy. Pike kept demanding more money. Daniel had the papers. He said he would go to the police unless I gave him the organizer. You were the organizer, Wolf said. No, not at first. But in the end? Finch looked at the joined root notice. In the end, I was the only one who understood. The whole system. That was as close to pride as he came. Kramer stood. Harold Finch, you are under arrest for the murder of Daniel Mercer. Pearlie took Finch by the arm. Finch did not resist. The remaining suspects watched him cross the office and leave through the hall. Kramer collected the route notice and portfolio. You'll have statements from the others by tonight, he said. Mr. Pike, Mr. Kerr, Mr. Shaw, and Mr. Moss will require separate charges, Wolf replied. I know my job. Repetition may someday make that true. Kramer glared, then followed Pearlie. The others left gradually. Owen remained long enough to thank Wolf, though the words cost him something. Wolf accepted them with a small inclination of his head. When the office was empty, I closed the Rosewood Box. It seemed harmless enough, I said. Just a polished box on a landing. Wolf leaned back and closed his eyes. Harmless objects are frequently preferred by harmful men. It kept perfect. Time. Indeed. He folded his hands over his middle. Timetables are one of crime's favorite superstitions, Archie. A criminal repeats an act at the same hour and begins to believe punctuality has made it invisible. I looked at the box. Every Friday at 11, it had appeared like clockwork. The tenants had watched it, wondered about it, and finally accepted it as part of the house. But perfect schedules leave perfect patterns. In the end, the Rosewood Box had not hidden the murderer. Its punctuality had exposed him.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to me tonight.